our Economic Development Secretary, Yvonne Howe, the governor, lieutenant governor, MDAR, are talking about more short-term help, which may look like a no or low-interest loan.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday and every Friday. We are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
So it is imminent indictment watch 2.0, or is it 3.0? We're starting this morning with news, as you heard a minute ago on NPR. Former President Trump says he's received word from Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, or as he calls him in a recent post, deranged Jack Smith, in connection with the criminal investigation into his role in the January 6th insurrection. The Justice Department has been investigating the events of the day and the broader conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election, which put Biden in office. On Truth Social, it's Trump's own social media platform, the former president wrote that he has 4 days to report to a grand jury. It's not clear if that's true, but that's his allegation. This would, of course, be the second time the former president has faced federal criminal charges. He was indicted last month on 37 felony counts, alleging he illegally kept classified documents in Mar-a-Lago, refused to turn them back over to the government after leaving office, and obviously, in the first couple of weeks of August, the charges coming out of Georgia, possibly against Trump himself, are scheduled. So what do you make of this? Does it only embolden the former president? And just like the first set of indictments, will it expand his lead over his Republican opponents in the primary? Or is this finally the end for our insurrectionist former president? The number is 877-301-8970. Can I say what I really feel? I don't know if it's going to be the end of Trump. It is the end of our democracy if this has no impact. I know innocent until proven guilty. The fact that a former president is apparently any day now, and by the way, after the notification that he was a target in Mar-a-Lago, it was 3 weeks until the actual indictments came down. So this would be early August, the exact same time that Willis, the DA in Fulton County in Georgia, is supposed to come down with her state indictments,
when
county
he was looking for those
there.
11,000 votes on the tape recorder.
What do you think this means for our democracy if it turns out not only this has no impact on tens of millions of voters, but causes even more people, like the first indictments did, to decide that Trump is the man to lead this nation?
Well, we know that Lauren Boebert, the gun-toting congresswoman from Colorado, said that the Department of Justice is just weaponized against Donald Trump, and their indictments have lost all credibility. So I guess that would be the argument of the completely pro-MAGA forces and people supporting him in Congress. But I do think the average person, I don't think he can win. I don't think he can win. He's probably going to be the Republican
nominee. By the way, that's
nominee.
not an answer to the question. That's not an answer to the question at all.
What's
His
the answer?
numbers went up up over DeSantis 9 percentage points after he and by the way, yesterday while you were out, CNN released a poll, favorability of the former president and the current president, 33%, which is pathetic for Donald Trump, 32%, which is even more pathetic for Joe Biden. And by the way, speaking of pathetic, Nikki
But they're
Haley,
about different things.
So?
Well, I think that doesn't mean, you have to look at these. To me, that people
You
think
dismiss
Trump,
all this stuff by saying Trump can't win. He
can't.
can win. Of course he
well,
can.
I don't think he can win. But anyway, I think the thing is that we have a debate. There's so many indictments coming down the pike against the president. We hear this morning, and he's about to be indicted on January 6th. We're debating if we should even talk about it because there's so many indictments there, and it's just a long line. I mean, we have E. Jean Carroll. He's already been found guilty.
Well, that was no, he wasn't found guilty. That's not a criminal thing. That was a civil thing.
Well, he's nonetheless a civil case.
Yeah.
He's found. Well, let's put it that way. Put it libel. But the fact the jury believed that he sexually assaulted and defamed this woman. And the next day he goes out to continue to defame her, right after he's found libel.
True.
So she has to file suit yet again because he learned nothing from that. Then we have the Mar-a-Lago federal obstruction charges, moving things around at Mar-a-Lago, which apparently a lot of which is recorded. You can see this moving on, going around all these boxes. We saw the boxes in the bathroom and all that. We got the Georgia thing, the Fonnie Willis thing you point out, where he was looking for the 11,000 votes, and this. I mean, it's just one after another after another.
But can I go back at let's assume you were right, and you've blithely said for weeks he can't win. Let's assume he runs as the Republican nominee and he loses, and only 75 million people again decide to vote for a guy who is charged with, by that time, probably hundreds of felonies. What does that say about the future of this democracy?
Well,
even if 80-plus-year-old Joe Biden beats him
I am betting
next
that
November.
75 million people will not vote for him again. I mean, I just think this is too much.
I hope.
And you even hear at some of these rallies when you have reporters going off, the papers are covering it, the TV's covering it, going off to Iowa, going off to places. I mean, I think probably the drop in DeSantis is because of DeSantis. I mean, it's a very unappealing.
Who's rising against Donald Trump?
Well, because
Nobody.
if you're not going for DeSantis, the other person, I don't think the Asa Hutchinson field is growing dramatically, or the Chris Christie field, the Republicans that are running for the nomination and are very critical of Trump. But I think DeSantis is falling because he has none of...
Who's rising against Donald Trump in the Republican
no
side?
one.
Nobody. Exactly.
Well, I think
the Republicans in this country are happy with a likely felonious former president who tried to lead an insurrection. That doesn't worry you?
It does worry me, but I don't buy the idea that they're all happy. I think there is a certain number of those forever Trumpers that think, as Lauren Boebert thinks, that the DOJ is weaponized against Trump. I don't think the majority of Republicans believe it anymore. I just don't think it's true. I could be wrong.
Well, in any case, 877.
Before we get any further,
877-301-8970. Go ahead.
I want to point out that you have to give Trump this. He does have these wild and crazy emails on tweets on True Social. What do you call them on True Social?
Posts,
not tweets.
we call them.
Posts.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, Jack Smith is deranged.
Yeah.
Shay and our staff looked up the other things he's called him. He's called Jack Smith. And you all know the picture of Jack Smith looking like an executioner, from... He could have been up at the Salem witch trials, And Trump has called him deranged today. Last time he called him sick puppet. He said who needs to be put to rest. He's also called him a thug and a raging and uncontrollable Trump hater. I think he's also called him various diseases, a sociopath and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the things he calls this guy are just unbelievable. 877-301-8970 is the question. Does this matter? Is just a long line in indictments against the President of the United States? What does it say for us if people are not upset about this? Nikki Haley is kind of halfway.
She's not halfway.
Well,
she says it's a distraction. How about calling it what it is? That this guy is being accused of trying to overthrow the government he hasn't been charged yet. He is likely to be indicted for an attempt to overthrow the government of the United States of America. And she doesn't have the courage to say it.
It seems to me we should be waiting till September for all these movements because everybody's in the heat wave and this is summer vacation.
I don't know what's with you.
They can't pay attention to any of this. But just think of the campaign season ahead. I mean, the arrangement of the different trials. He's going to be in Florida for one. He's going to be in New York for another one. Maybe he's going got to be in Bedminster, New Jersey for.
Well, he may not. He's got a motion in front of his own appointed judge in Florida saying the trial should be postponed until after the 2024 election because he's very busy. That's a good reason not to have a trial.
No, I know.
Because the charged person is busy.
One of us could have said that. You know, I'm opening my mail. I'm cleaning my sock drawer.
I'm busy.
I'm busy. I can't show up in court to face the law. And I think did you point out already that the Georgia Supreme Court that dismissed?
No, mention this. Huge.
Yeah. Okay, this is another one. I think he gets these lawyers to go in and just make these demands that are insane. And the Georgia Supreme Court unanimously, and it was, I believe, 8 of the 9 of them are
were
Republicans.
appointed by Republicans.
Unanimously dismissed his efforts there to block an Atlanta, that's Fonnie Willis, of course, district attorney, from investigating him over allegations of election interference. So
you see how fast their decision came down? This is the highest appellate court in the state. 3 days. 3 days is unheard of.
So he just goes in and says he wants the court to block the investigation. Does he give a legal reasons why?
No, in fact, they said one of his aims was to disqualify Willis, the prosecutor, and they say there's neither factual nor legal reason presented.
That's right.
As to why Willis should be disqualified.
And he wants to throw out all the evidence gathered by the special grand jury. I mean, it's so absurd. You know, I can't believe that people still stick with this guy. But
Can I try one more? One more try. You say I can't believe people still stick with this guy. You say they're not going to stick with this guy. Explain to me why.
Some of them will.
Explain to me why we should all not be concerned, even if you're right and he loses the presidency, assuming he's the nominee. Why it should not concern us that at least as of this moment, a huge swath of American voters are not only fine with Donald Trump, but he's their guy. Tell me why I shouldn't worry about that.
I think you should worry about that. But I think, you know, when you look at the bubble those people are in, I mean, and look at the Republicans in D.C. We can't get the head. We can't get the head of the Marines. We're holding up all these appointments. This Tuberville, whatever his name is, from Alabama, the senator, the one that doesn't know that white nationalist is a racist term. You look at him. You look at Speaker of the House, McCarthy, right? The FBI wants to build a new office there. He's going to block the FBI building a new office because he wants to, you know, weaken the FBI, send it back to wall.
But I thought your position is Trump's going to lose, so who cares? Isn't that what you're saying this morning?
I think that I hope, and I could be wrong, but I think if Trump loses in a big way, which I think he will, it will take at least a big chunk of the wind out of his sails. I mean, they're staying with him because they think they need him in the Republican base elections,
Okay,
right?
so even if, last time I'll try, and then I promise we'll get to the calls. Even if he loses, and you're right, which I think is not even is an issue, but not enough of an issue, even if he's the nominee of the Republican Party, does that not scare you for the future of this country?
Yes, it very much does, because we have a problem with the truth in the United States of America now, and it's going to get worse because of AI. It's going to get scarily worse.
Do you think Jack Smith is a sick puppet or a deranged prosecutor? Which would you choose? If I was the defendant, if I was criminally charged, which of course I was in a matter which we're not going to discuss again.
Did you call the judge a sick puppet?
Those were misdemeanors. I don't think I would be calling the prosecutor deranged and a sick puppet. I don't think that really helps your case that much. Jack and Lowell, you've been very patient. You're first on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about Donald Trump being the target of yet another potential set of indictments. Hey there, Jack.
Hey, how's it, guys? How's it going, you guys?
Excellent.
Fine, thanks.
Thank you. What's up?
Good. So I just wanted to share a quick joke that I've been saying since the Mueller investigation when I was a very single gay guy in undergrad college here in Mass. I've been saying that the person who ultimately leads to Trump getting put in prison, I'm going to want as my first husband. So I said about Bob Mueller. He's a little bit older, but I can go for a silver fox. I said it about Fauci because I thought he was going to be the one. But I know Jack Smith is happily married with a daughter. They seem to be in a long-term relationship. I can dream myself. But I think that Jack Smith's going to be the one that I ultimately fall in love with because I think he's got it. I think that Trump is scared of him. I think because he's just unravelable. And Trump's affects democracy. And I'm sorry, I cried on election night 2016 because I predicted that something like January 6th was going to happen that night. This was the most unsurprising thing, and I'm sorry, Trump deserves to go to jail.
Well, I think you've picked a good mate. I hope he's responsive. Jack, thank you very much for your call. Jack Smith's record, war crimes, whatever, this is it. As the caller said, he's a pretty unshakable kind of prosecutor kind of thing. I mean, Mueller, who had a wonderful career, sort of faded at the end there, I think, and was not quite ready for prime time, as evidenced by that hearing in front of Congress. This guy is ready for prime time.
Yeah, and I think also Mueller was operating in a pre-Trump world completely, going in and never expecting the Attorney General of the United States
That's a very good point.
to lie about the Mueller report, where there were, 10 or 12 very well thought out lists, bullet points of obstruction of justice that the president had committed then, according to Mueller, but he spun it.
Does it bother you? We'll get back to your calls in a second. There's an attempt by a lot of Trump sycophants, including people who work for him, to rehabilitate their image. One person who has done this repeatedly is Barr, who's being interviewed everywhere, including on our station, favorite station, CNN. It seems to me when you introduce somebody like that as a guest, you have an obligation to say what their position was when they worked for this guy and what they did when they worked for this guy before you allow them to attempt to crawl out from under that whatever by saying, as Barr said, well, it's an ironclad case in Mar-a-Lago. He should be, he'll be convicted. It is, and that woman, what's the name of the woman who was a chief advisor who's now regular on CNN every single night?
Her name.
And it's just,
this was the previous guy, and they haven't changed the policy. The previous guy that ran CNN didn't last long, Licht. His idea was we want to be more middle of the road. We want to get all these
I'm fine with a lot of
Trump
Republicans being there, but the Trump people, unless they're willing to acknowledge that they were fine with caging little kids in the Southwest, but now it's a bridge too far.
Okay, I have Matt from Middleborough.
What does he say?
Telling me, Marjorie, haven't you... Oh, goodness, where did he go? He disappeared. He's basically saying that I'm wrong. Here he is.
What does he say?
Marjorie, haven't you learned the lesson? Don't underestimate Trump. He can win, and although I think gambling is bad, I would place a wager. I had to apologize. My emails are flying around, moving around the page badly. But in any case, he says that he thinks that he's going to win in 2025.
Let me, by the way, I tend to agree.
2024.
I agree with you that Biden is the likely winner if it was a head-to-head. Let's assume Biden has a health issue in the middle of a televised debate with Donald Trump, and Trump's only 3 points behind before the debate. What do you think happens after that?
I don't think I'm less worried about that than I am about Kennedy. Or I'm worried about Joe Manchin, this no-name party.
I know. Are they meeting today in New Hampshire? It's sometime
I'm not
this
sure,
week,
but this is where we're trying to get someone kind of in the middle, Republicans and Democrats. I think Joe Manchin, because of climate change, would have a very, very difficult time getting a lot of votes, but he might get a lot of votes. I'm worried about a third-party candidate, because everyone is talking about this now with going back to Jill Stein, who was the Green candidate.
Cornel West,
he's running, that's right. He was on television last night. He's running. So Kennedy, we're going to talk about him later in the week, I hope, because he was in the 20s in polls. Now he's in the teens.
Actually, the next caller wants to talk about Kennedy. Hey, Tom from Brockton, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
First of all, I voted for Trump twice. I don't think he can get reelected, to be honest.
Why?
With you. And the reason why, college-educated white women, he said some things in his past that he can never undo. And that is the one group that if you're to win the presidency, you have to win them over. White, college-educated suburban women will not vote for him.
Tom, don't forget the non-college-educated women, period, who voted down all these abortion restrictions, who are not going to vote against abortion. But go ahead.
All right. So, myself, I think DeSantis is a better candidate because he's got an impeccable background. Navy SEAL, plus the fact that he got a majority of Hispanic voters in a purple state to vote for him overwhelmingly. And he's done a very good job as governor, like it or not, on the social issues.
Well, we don't like it at all, but we hear you do. You told our call screener, though, that you thought that RFK might be your choice. Did you change your mind in the last 5 minutes?
I am not a registered voter in Massachusetts,
yes,
even though I own a house there.
Yep.
I'm registered to vote here in West Virginia. But West Virginia, you either declare a Republican or a Democrat ballot. I'm going to vote for Bobby Kennedy, and for the following reason. Bobby Kennedy has done a lot of research through the years, and I just recently subscribed to the Boston Globe, and now they're making him out to be an anti-Semite. That is just ridiculous. And I think I want to hear more evidence with regards to how that virus got started in China. I mean, that affected the whole world. And for asking
Tom, can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
We are probably going to discuss RFK Jr.'s candidacy later in the week because he's scheduled to appear before the Judiciary Committee, I think in the House. Why don't you listen to the tape that the New York Post turned up from the dinner that he says was off the record, and then call us back on whenever we do this on Thursday and see if you're able to say again. And you thought it was not an example of anti-Semitism. You know that his sister, his sister and his brother said that they thought it was anti-Semitic.
I'm married to a black woman. I can't get sickle cell anemia. She can. Is that a racist statement?
I don't have any idea what that has to do with the subject at hand at all. The question is, did he make an anti-Semitic statement? You don't think he did. Call us back later in the week. Tom, thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see what people think about RFK Jr. I wonder what his father's thinking about RFK Jr.
Well, actually, didn't Joe Kennedy, the elder, say that this is not what our father would be saying or believing or embracing? And I think that's probably true.
Peter from Newton, thank you for calling.
Hey, Peter. Peter.
Oh, he disappeared.
Whoa.
Okay, let's go to Steve in Watertown. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Steve.
Good morning. How you doing? Listen, I was watching Rachel Maddow's show last night a little bit, and she put on a snippet about the Republican Party trying to put together what they're calling Project 2025. And this all has to do with whoever the Republican president, if any Republican president gets in the White House, they want to give him complete power of the whole government by means of taking away all power from all executive branches, including Congress, and having all the power be with just that one guy. If that isn't a dictatorship, I don't know what is.
Well, by the way, the Supreme Court seems to be moving in the same direction. All of their anti-regulatory behavior, it's not causing that power to accrue in the presidency, but in the Congress. Basically say the entities that are intended to effectuate the policy that becomes law in this country, they should have no power either. I agree. It's terrifying, and I'm glad you brought it up. Steve, thanks for the call.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to keep talking about this for a little while longer. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Here's what Trump posted on Truth Social. Deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with Joe Biden, I can't believe both of us are laughing, DOJ, sent a letter, again, it was Sunday night, he says, stating that I am a capital letter target of the January 6th grand jury investigation, giving me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest and indictment. That's what he wrote. And we're asking, it appears that an indictment is imminent, as we said earlier, after the target letter went out in Mar-a-Lago. It was 3 weeks till the indictments came down. That would put this in late July or early August, which is the time that the prosecutor in Fulton County in Georgia has said that there will be indictments handed down. We don't know if Trump is among the indictees, but I would guess is likely to be in Georgia, so it could be a hell of a summer. What's your reaction to all this? 877-301-8970.
So I'm a big believer. You know, Paul just said Republicans deal in fear, Democrats deal in hope, which is kind of a phrase that we've heard before. I'm neither. I'm an independent, but I think the social issues are going to crush the Republicans this time around. I think abortion and gay stuff, because 1 in 4 women have had an abortion. That's a lot of people to criminalize when they're your mothers, your sisters, your children. When you have all these stories about women having to go into sepsis, which kills you, before physicians will do anything in places like Texas. I think that's a problem for the Republicans. And I also think gay rights is a problem for the Republicans. DeSantis is so cruel. You know, I think, and no matter how you feel about if you're trans people, do you think that the government should be telling parents and children what kind of medical care they should get for their children? I mean, I think that's just so out there. It's just so out there.
I agree. The place where you and I are different, I don't disagree with you about the likely outcome, at least as of this moment, even though I worry more about it. But what I worry about, what you seem unworried about, is if, let's assume they're the nominees, Biden and Trump. Maybe they won't be, but it's likely as of the moment. If Biden wins 52-48, it's good that Donald Trump is not president again. To me, 48%, 47% is not a good sign for the future of this country at all.
No, it's not a good sign for the future of the country. The thing that scares me more than anything is the third-party candidates. You know, somebody has sent a thing about Green Party Colonel West is a problem. So if you have all these third-party people, Bobby Kennedy, Joe Manchin, if it's possible,
Kennedy's not a third party. He's running in the Democratic Party.
He's running the Democratic Party.
Cornel West is third.
That's
the
right.
no-name thing
That's
would
right.
be a third party.
My mistake. Eliminate Kennedy, because I don't think he's going to get anywhere. But the third-party people, I mean, Jill Stein, Ralph Nader, people think that she turned the vote back with Gore.
Well, Ralph Nader had a was credentialed, but he still probably cost the election of Gore.
He did probably cost the election of Gore in Florida. I think, how many votes did Ralph Nader get in Florida?
More than 454 or whatever it was.
Peter in Newton, you're back.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, I love your show. Listen all the time.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I think Trump is guilty. I think he's a liar, and I think he should go to jail. I really have a problem with Trump because he's a liar and he's not popular, and Biden's also a liar and he's not popular. Biden lied about the lunch counters. He lied about being arrested in South Africa. He lied about supporting the climate when he became president. He's drilling more and more and more. He's a drill president, and he's killing the climate. We're going to have climateflation, which means higher prices based on climate breakdown.
By the way, for whatever it's worth, go ahead, but Peter, before you continue, do you want to respond to the climate thing, or should I?
I was just going to say, Peter, a lot of people, myself included, were really upset about Alaska, were really upset about the deal he made with Joe Manchin. But on the other hand, that he needed Manchin to get that bill through. And that bill,
largest
the inflation,
investment in climate ever.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously it's a problem, and certainly Alaska's a problem. But, I mean, should he have not gotten that? Should we not have had that bill? It would have been worse.
Well, what's your point, Peter? They're both liars, according to you. Peter, what's your point?
I agree with you, but the point is this. The only person who's not a liar, the only person who has honor is Marianne Williamson, and she is going to end the fossil age.
Okay, fine. I got it. We got it. She's running again. For those who don't know, on the Democratic side, I interviewed her last round. I don't think she's going to be the nominee. But Peter, thank you for your perspective. 877-301-8970 is our number. We have time for one more, I think.
Somebody else from Newton. This one is Phyllis. Hi, Phyllis.
Hey, Phyllis. Got to turn your radio down, Phyllis. This is going well. Phyllis, turn the radio down.
Meanwhile, Mary from
Thank you,
Attleboro
Phyllis, for your
points
call.
out
Appreciate
Sanders was not a Navy SEAL, and that is
There
correct.
wasn't?
No, he was in the service for the Navy. I think he was a JAG officer, a lawyer in the service, but he was not a Navy SEAL.
You know, I restrained myself for a second when I think it was Peter was calling because you were glaring at me saying, let him talk, which was fine. To compare even what Peter the caller said with what he says were the lies of Joe Biden, most of which I disagree with, some of which were factually accurate, with the, quote, lies of Donald Trump, is exactly what I'm talking to you about why we're in such danger in this country. Making an equivalency between Biden and Trump is just, it's incredible to me. It's just incredible to me. That shows how far we have slid.
Stephen Marble says we look really crabby on YouTube.
We do?
Yeah.
I feel crabby.
We just smile more, Jim.
I'm not smiling. Not smiling until Marjorie says that she's as worried as I am.
Yeah, Steve, that's an excellent point. We really look crabby here.
I feel crabby. That's a fake smile, though.
That is a fake smile. Okay. Thank you very much. We're changing the subject right now. Maybe
Let's not change the subject.
No, we are changing the subject. Well, it's something to smile about more. We're going to talk to our sports authority, Trenny Casey. A young tennis upstart wins Wimbledon.
20 years old.
And somebody else, the long-term champion, didn't do so well, did he? Okay, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7, some sports coming up next with Trenny Casey. We are broadcasting and not smiling enough, apparently, on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Marjorie said we should smile. I'm not going to smile until she says that the country is in a total mess, regardless what happens on Election Day in November of 2024.
Yeah, you're just too crabby, Jim.
No, I'm not too crabby. I'm realistic. We join now by Trenny Casey.
Of course he's crabby. It's 1,000 degrees with 1,000% humidity every single day.
I actually like that. Trenny is a reporter and anchor and whatever for NBC Sports Boston.
Whatever.
And a BPR contributor. Hi, Trenny. How are you?
Guys.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Trenny.
Thank you.
Takes too much effort to smile in this crappy weather.
So we're going to talk about some of the greatest people playing their sports.
Oh, good.
Let's start with what happened with Djokovic. I think people think he's one of the greatest ever.
Oh, he's not. I mean, if you don't think Djokovic is one of the greatest tennis players ever, you haven't watched. He's won 23 majors. He is part of that triumvirate of Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, and Novak Djokovic, and he's the last one standing. He's also the youngest. He's 36. I think Nadal is 38, and Federer is now retired in his 40s. But this is a group of men who dominated every single Wimbledon, every single major in tennis for the better part of the last 20 years. And Djokovic has been in it. He was in the French Open final. He won. He actually he beat Carlos Alcaraz in the semifinals of the French Open, and clay is supposed to be Alcaraz's strong suit, being a Spaniard. And then the two went head-to-head at Wimbledon. Even though Alcaraz is the top player in the world, he was seeded number 1. Djokovic was seeded number 2. Djokovic was favored to win because he's so good on grass. But Alcaraz was unbelievable. It was an incredible match.
Can we play a little clip?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is from Carlos Alcaraz beating Djokovic at the Wimbledon final.
Djokovic is deposed. There's a new king of centre court, Carlos Alcaraz of Spain.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good little
Did
fight
you either
there.
of you watch the match?
Yeah, I did.
It was incredible.
5 sets was great.
I did not.
5 sets, almost 5 hours, right, Jim? I think it took. I mean, they were like
4 plus. Yeah,
yes,
4.5%.
you know.
What was the weather like there?
I mean, nice enough. I think that the roof was open, but it's been a little rainy. They had a lot of issues. They had a lot of matches pushed back because of rain and delayed. But the best part, I don't know if you kept the broadcast on, Jim, to watch the post-game interviews, but they interviewed Djokovic first, and he's people have different opinions about what he's really like behind the scenes, but in front of the cameras, he's always very gracious and kind, and talked about how impressive Alcaraz was, and then he got very choked up because he talked about his sons who were in the audience watching him, and then Alcaraz gets up there and he goes, as soon as it came out of his mouth, he was like, oh no, I should not be saying this. He said, I've been watching you win. You've been winning tournaments since I was born. Which is true. There's a 16-year. I mean, it's a 16-year age difference.
Yeah.
Carlos Alcaraz is 20 and Novak Djokovic is 36. So Alcaraz has grown up watching Nadal and Federer and Djokovic. So the question now is, and this was a great question that we had Mark Bertrand on my show last night. He said, okay, well, who's the 2 and the 3 in men's tennis? And that's where it's hard. Like, we really haven't had any 3 players take over a sport the way that Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic did, just making it such compelling television. And there certainly isn't an American that has come close.
You know what I wonder? Do we know whether women can last longer in their prime than men in sports, or is it around the same? Mid to late 30s, things start really go south.
I think it starts to be mid to late 30s. Yeah. I mean, Serena played into her 40s. Venus, who is, I think, I'm 46. I think Venus is 44 or 45. Yeah. She did play in Wimbledon. I don't believe she lost in the first round. She's battled the injuries, but she's still getting out there. Serena has retired, for the best of our knowledge. I think she's pregnant with her second child.
Okay.
And, she has like a 5 or a 6-year-old. Federer in his 40s injured. Nadal now at 38 has had constant injuries. I think if you're healthy and you take care of your body, like Djokovic would be one that I'm curious to see how long he can play, because he has not been plagued by injuries the way Andy Murray, Roger Federer, and Rafael Nadal have been later in their careers.
I think the key to Djokovic continuing is he should get vaccinated. As soon as he gets vaccinated, I think he'll be perfectly fine.
Remember that?
Did you see one of the shots they took of him during that long match? He's known for switching shirts because he gets so sweaty in between sets, and he had like this weird patch on. And so they talked about it. It's some weird mumbo jumbo thing about ions going through and like keeping you more hydrated. And I'm like, he believes in that, but he doesn't believe.
Did you see what the patch said? It said "Vote RFK Jr." on it. So before I'm sorry, I'm in a mood.
I know.
Before we leave this, I never heard, I cannot tell a lie, of Marketa
Vondrousova. I don't even know if that's exactly how you say her name.
Unseeded. Does an unseeded person ever win?
It's never happened. Not in Wimbledon,
That's pretty exciting.
She rose the ranks. I remember her when I did the Olympics in Japan. Like, I remember her playing well and people talking about the talent she had, but her too plagued by injuries. And so she's just sort of quiet quietly worked her way back. But I don't know if you guys, how deep into her story you got, but she didn't think she had any real chance of winning, so her husband didn't even come to Wimbledon. Her husband wasn't there. She was at home. He was at home.
Never live that down.
Well, no, he ended up coming for the final, but you know why he was home? Because they have a hairless cat, and they couldn't find anyone to watch the cat, so he stayed home with the hairless cat. And then finally, when they made arrangements for him to hurry up and get there when she was in the final, and she went up and she hugged him, and her sister was there with her instead. I was like, why couldn't your sister, watch the hairless cat? But
was it because the cat was hairless that no one wanted to watch the cat? Or
I don't know. I forget where they live.
Fur?
I forget where they live. Maybe it's just tough. Maybe people are on. It's Europe, so people go on.
Imagine what a hairless cat looks like.
Have you never seen a hairless cat?
Hairless.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. Like, I would not want to watch a hairless cat because every time I would see the thing, I would run away from it.
Pat the thing like you would.
Well, no, because you're just petting skin.
Oh goodness.
Okay, well, fine. Let's move on. Speaking of, Marjorie started the theme of the greatest athletes in their sports. I am obsessed with Ohtani.
You should be.
And it seems to me, the whole question. This is a guy, Japanese player, who is playing now for a team that has the two best players in baseball, and despite that, everybody else is so horrible in the team. They go nowhere.
Yep.
The question is, will they trade him?
Well, and Mike Trout's always injured, right? So
he's the other one. Will they be traded? Will he be traded? He'll be a free agent at the end of the season. The Red Sox in the running. It seems to me, for those who don't know, he's not only a fabulous hitter, he's also one of the best pitchers in baseball. And most experts, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, say since Babe Ruth, which was a long time ago, there's never been anybody who does both and does it so well. Why should he not get two salaries? If you were going after one of the best pitchers, you get a salary.
Well,
if you're going after one of the best hitters, you get a huge salary. Why shouldn't he get two?
I think he's about to.
Are you serious?
Well, he's about to get paid. They think so. This is why this is such a big story. So this is like a unicorn. We've never seen this in baseball. He is on pace right now to possibly break the non-steroid era home run record.
I didn't know that.
Like that's where he's at. He's
Really?
challenging Aaron Judge from just a couple of years ago. That's how powerful he is, and he's an every fifth day starter. He's in their starting rotation. He's not someone who goes out and pitches a couple of innings in relief for the Angels.
Does he hit when he's pitching, or he doesn't?
He does not hit when he's pitching.
Okay,
so he hits 4 days a week, and he pitches the fifth day. But they expect him to make upwards of $500 to $600 million. It would be by far
Give it to him.
the greatest. So the biggest contract right now is Mike Trout, who I think signed for like $426 or $433 million. To me, he's worth. I'm with you. If you'll pay a top line pitcher $300 million and you'll pay a top line hitter $300 million, then give him $600 million. I mean, he deserves it. He puts the Angels are terrible, but people come out just to see Shohei Ohtani play.
How exciting is it to see him? I mean, it is.
I've never seen him play in person.
I haven't either, but I've watched him on TV.
On TV.
We talked about before, one of the greatest moments in baseball, which doesn't have great moments, unfortunately, enough anymore, even though the speed up of the game has been a big thing. In the World Baseball Championship, the two teammates, Mike Trout, generally seen, we talked about this with Trenny, as one of the greatest players ever, not just now. He's been injured a lot. 2 outs, 9th inning, Japan versus the United States. Trout's the batter. His teammate, Ohtani, is the pitcher. And he strikes him out. It was so tension-filled.
Oh, my gosh.
It's all over, obviously, YouTube. Yeah. You should just check it out. It is one of the most beautiful sports moments, like, ever.
Well, and I think what the Angels are up against is, do you want to be the team that traded away Shohei Ohtani and didn't try to keep him in free agency? But do you also want to be the team that doesn't get Shohei Ohtani in free agency? And then, so if he gets to free agency, they get nothing in return. At least if you trade him away. And I was reading this article that Jamie sent, I think that you found, that kind of ranked the teams that could possibly trade for Shohei Ohtani. And it's not the teams you would think. Like the Dodgers and the Yankees can pay for him. The Cubs can pay for him. The Red Sox, if they were willing, they could pay for him. They could pay for him if they wanted to. But teams like the Rangers, the Baltimore Orioles, like these teams that have a lot of prospects, they could replenish the Angels' system. The problem is you're basically renting him, because I don't think the Orioles are going to have $600 million to pay this guy. The Rangers could, though. The Rangers as a team, the Rangers and the Mariners, I think, are interesting teams to keep an eye on. Apparently, he wants to stay on the West Coast. He prefers to be. It's just easier, I think, to get back and forth to Japan. He probably likes the weather more.
Doesn't matter that the best young Japanese player is playing in Boston.
I mean, maybe.
I don't know if they're close or.
I mean, they played on the World
I know
Baseball
they did.
Classic
I know.
together. Masataka Yoshida was the offensive hero in that game where Shohei Ohtani was the pitching hero. But there's something, I don't know. People would like the Red Sox to trade for him.
How exciting would that be?
And bring him here and then try to lure him. I'm actually not in that camp. I think you've got the money. Try to buy him. Just try to buy him. You don't have to, because if you give up your farm and he looks and he sees what you gave up to get him, the Red Sox farm system isn't deep. I don't think it's deep enough that you then can field a great team to put around him. So then he's in the same position that he was in Los Angeles.
He'll be at the Dodgers.
Yeah, he probably will end up being a Dodger.
So, continuing Marjorie's theme of greatest athletes in the sports, I don't only want to spend a minute on this, but Lionel Messi, everybody knows, is going to the Miami MLS team. He signed formally the last couple of days. That wasn't my favorite moment, even though the stadium was full
for
his signing. But you know what the best part was? Did you see the photographs, I think, in the British tabloids about him shopping by himself in a public supermarket?
And no one recognizing
Well, obviously
him?
one person did because they took his picture. But essentially, the greatest soccer player in the world is shopping at a supermarket. Publix is a big supermarket in Florida, for those who don't know. And he's just doing his shopping, filling. I just loved it. Like normal stuff for the
probably something that in other countries he hasn't been able to do since he was a little kid.
That's a very good point, actually.
You know, you think
about
he couldn't go to like a market in Argentina and he'd be mobbed in Argentina. He'd be mobbed in Spain when he played for Barcelona. I think then he went and played for Paris. It is interesting to see. Did you see how much the tickets are going for his first game?
How much?
So they're averaging about $500 per ticket on the market, but they're going as high as $110,000.
Oh my God!
On the secondary market to see him. Stadiums across the MLS are selling out because people want to see him play.
Exciting,
the question then becomes: does he get people interested in MLS, and does this help boost people's interest in MLS, or is it a flash in the pan? I mean, that we won't be able to tell for a while.
How old is he? He's in his mid-30s,
right? I want to say 35 or 36. Yeah.
So he can play a couple
he's kind
of years.
he's kind of again, listen, no good European soccer players are coming to play at the peak of their career for MLS. They're just not. It's not a high enough, even the best American soccer players don't even stay in MLS. They go over and they play European soccer.
Do you think the NFL is so dominant, I guess?
Maybe in our lifetime. I don't know. I just feel like the NFL is such a whole. We were talking about this yesterday because I was talking with one of our sports reporters on the Telemundo side about how different women's soccer is than men's soccer because the Women's World Cup begins on Thursday. The United States are still the prohibitive favorites, and it's because the United States women's team is so good because I think of my niece, all of her friends love to play soccer.
Yeah.
And it's an ability for them to play at a high level. Whereas if you're a top-notch athlete in the United States and you're a male, there are much more lucrative avenues to put soccer.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true.
You know what? Again, this may not translate beyond Messi. I've never been to an MLS game. Have you ever been with your kid? Was a great soccer
to Gillette. Player. I went to Gillette and watched
you not? Well, I have never been. I would clearly. What's it called? Inter Miami.
Yep.
Are they playing in Gillette this season or
That's
next
a great
season?
question.
And I went and saw the women at the
go,
BU Stadium. Women have played.
But if I could get a tip, wouldn't you go in a second to see Messi? The question is, does it so excite you? Is your point that you go to the next MLS game even when Messi's not playing? I don't know what the answer is.
And the other question is, there's been some question about whether or not. So in Europe, they play on natural grass. And here, a lot of our stadiums, and we've had this conversation about the injuries it leads to, are artificial turf.
It's hard on your legs,
It's really, even the new kind that have those little pebbles underneath it, it's just not as stable. Football players hate it. Julian Edelman has been really outspoken that he thinks it ended his career not playing on grass. And so it'll be curious to see how much and how often he plays at a place like Gillette where they don't have natural grass.
And don't they, in some of the towns are upset about it because of the chemicals in the AstroTurf.
Yes.
That they're worried about the kids.
Yeah. So. It's not AstroTurf technically anymore. It's some sort of synthetic grass. But, here's what I always say. Lambeau Field has real grass. If you can grow real grass at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin, you can grow natural grass anywhere.
And the only reason they don't is because it's more expensive.
It's expensive, yes.
Yeah, clovers. They should go for clovers. You don't have to worry about watering them so much as you do with the grass.
How many fields are covered in clover?
Well, I think it's something we can look forward to in the future.
Fields of clover.
Yeah, fields of clover. If you kind of leave your grass alone, the clover starts to appear, and then suddenly it moves its way across.
Speaking from experience, Margaret, not really mowing your lawn a lot.
That's right. Down at my sister's house, which is not very well mowed. where you have a clover field, and I'm very excited about it. Okay, so one more thing we're going to talk about here is, I'll play a little sound from this broadcaster too. This is a young man, works for the Fredericksburg Nationals. His name is Eric Bach, and he's broadcasting a baseball game during the 4-3 series finale win.
To the swinging and lining it down the line. That is a fair ball. And we are going home. To the time, all the time. And the Fred Nats win it 4-3.
Now, he's not in Major League Baseball.
Nope.
But he is an openly gay sportscaster, and there's just not many of them. And I love the piece the New York Times did about this young man and his career.
Yeah, it really, the headline grabbed me when I was looking for story ideas yesterday. I mean, here's a guy who, Eric Bach, who decided, in high school, knew he was gay, played on the baseball team, played sports, but didn't want to tell anyone, and has now since come out as gay, wrote about it in Outsports. And really it hasn't kind of come up since, but what he was trying to convey in this article is that even though I'm not treated differently, which is great, right? Like he goes, like it doesn't come up in conversation, baseball players don't treat him any differently, staffs don't treat him differently, his family, but that yet it's a burden because he's to the best of his knowledge, he's the only play-by-play person in baseball that he knows of who is an openly gay man. And so just the loneliness and isolation of that and it kind of, and listen, obviously we had two different paths, but some of the things he was talking about, like when he goes into clubhouses, how he's really hyper aware of where he's looking, how he's acting, like that resonated with me as a female going into locker rooms and clubhouses and worrying that you'd be perceived the wrong way. But, his mom was really nervous that she didn't want him to come out that openly because she was afraid it would hurt his job chances.
Well, for those who, you said he hasn't had incidents so far.
Well, he did have one that he wrote about finally in there. He said it happened, and I forget where it did. It was in the piece where someone found out that he was gay and sent him a pretty nasty note with a death threat. And he said in a weird way, it actually was like, okay, people are paying attention. I thought this was going to happen. At least now it's happened, and it's only happened once.
But at the same time, I hate saying people who say only one. One is horrible, especially if you're the target of this, which he was. As great as this is that he's there and accepted, you'd look down the street and see the Red Sox, who are led by a pretty progressive group of people, in my estimation, from Henry to Kennedy to these people, promoted that homophobic guy and ultimately cut him. But this is not some right-wing ownership group. It's a progressive, community-focused organization that promoted a guy to the majors because they needed a pitcher.
I know.
It's pathetic, actually.
And no less a week before Pride Night and during Pride Month.
Exactly, I forgot about that. That's right.
I know, and that's, I think he purposefully tries to not get too political about it. He tries to focus, Eric does, on his own personal experience. But I am curious to see the trajectory of his career. And
Is this single A? This is
he's
low?
single A, which is really typical, by the way. No one should look at this and go, oh, he's stuck in single A.
That's where you start.
If you're an aspiring play-by-play individual, Melanie Newman, who is now a play-by-play voice for the Baltimore Orioles. She also does some stuff for Apple TV and MLB Network. She started also with the single or double A Red Sox affiliates where she was doing play-by-play for the teams and PR, and then you just kind of slowly move your way up.
He's only out of college a couple of years.
Just out of college a couple of years. That is, Brian Anderson, who now you see all the time on national broadcasts. He started in low ball. Matt Vasgersian, that's a very normal trajectory. And if he's good, I just hope that he gets the opportunities that he deserves.
You're just right. So you mentioned low ball. Speaking of low ball, the end of the show today, we're going to talk about Speedos on men. And
I heard Jamie was telling me this. There's a 50% increase in sales?
Yeah,
a
through the roof.
200% increase.
Why?
In terms of men wearing Speedos.
Is it just too hot for swim trunks?
Well, so you only have 30 seconds here, but we'll be inviting callers to join us at the end of the show. What's your take? I can tell by looking in your face what your take is. If you're an Olympic swimmer, you're fine.
Okay, if you're an Olympic swimmer, you're trying to, that's different. That's drag. There's aerodynamics to it.
Exactly.
But you're going to the local pool and you're in a banana hammock? Get out of here. Get out of here.
Beautifully
Put some trunks on.
Okay.
I'm so with you.
Okay, Well, you don't have anything to do. You can listen. We're going to talk about that.
I can't wait to listen because I can't wait for someone to call in and explain. Give me a good reason why you need to wear a Speedo to the beach?
Yeah.
We're looking. We're gonna find out.
There's nothing quite, in my experience, like looking at a fat old guy in a Speedo at a beach, ogling. Is ogling the right word?
I always forget it's ogling or oogling. I guess it's ogling.
You know what I mean.
Okay. I don't know what it is. I can always never pronounce that word right. Okay. We've been talking with NBC Sports Boston anchor reporter Trenny Casey. Thank you very much, Trenny Casey. After the new news, the Boston Foundation's Lee Pelton, who's written a very detailed and insightful piece about affirmative action, the Supreme Court's decision. We're going to talk to him about that up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
legislators are gathering behind closed doors to figure out how to resolve a procedural dispute between the two chambers that's left the bill in limbo. The measure includes revised standards for how guns are licensed, where they can be carried, and how owners are trained. It also calls for better tracking of firearms components to prevent the spread of so-called ghost guns that are hard to trace. Leaders in the House and Senate largely agree on the measure's merits, but are at odds over which committee should handle the bill. There are just 2 weeks left in the current legislative session. Dominique Farrell, GBH News, 89.7.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Very nicely air-conditioned here today at the Boston Public Library.
Actually, it's not. It's air-conditioned, but not enough. But it's going to be more soon.
I have my sweater on.
Oh, that's very nice, Marjorie.
Thank you.
In any case, we're joined now at the library by Lee Pelton. Lee is the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation. He's also a member of GBH's Board of Trustees. He is Boston Magazine's third most influential person in Boston. Some people say, why do I mention that every time that he's on? I think it's pretty obvious why I mention it every time when he's on, and he's the immediate past president of Emerson College. And tomorrow night, there's a fabulous town hall moderated by our colleague Paris Alston at GBH. You can either attend in person or virtually. It's 6 to 7:30. It's sponsored by Get Connected and GBH World. It's called Affirmative Action Town Hall Discussion. Couple of panels, and Lee is either on one or both, but it looks like a terrific event. And you go to gbh.org/events, and you can either register to be there in person or to participate virtually. Lee Pelton, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Jim.
Yes.
Tell us when you're going to put on that Speedo and what beach you're going to be at so we can all show up.
Can I tell you something? I wouldn't do this if I were you, because since you brought it up,
yes,
I hate to lower but you already lowered the tone of the conversation. About 4 or 5 years ago, there's this guy, Roger Brown. What did he used to do?
He used to be president of Berkeley College.
And the guy, he's walking down the street with a guy who was the former president of Emerson College. What was his name?
Lee
Pelton. Lee Pelton. Right. And do you remember what Lee Pelton was wearing that day by any chance? I remember what Lee Pelton...
It was not a Speedo, Jim.
No, but he was wearing a body shirt that was his... Look at you laughing. You're embarrassed, right? Let me tell you, when you deal it, you got to be willing to take it, my friend,
that's
okay?
all I had in the closet.
I bet it was.
Okay.
Lee, we're thrilled to have you
here. Well, some people can wear body shirts, Jim, and some people can't.
That sadly is true.
Some people can wear Speedos and some people can't.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. Because it's it's an important issue. I think we can all agree. Anyway, but let's start with something else. You mentioned the panel that you're going to be on at GBH about affirmative action. You wrote a very provocative piece entitled "The Magic Kingdom: How the Supreme Court Got It Wrong in Its Landmark Affirmative Action Ruling." So, what were you trying to do in this piece?
Well, I was principally trying to show the sort of the magic, the magical thinking that went into this really perverse and wrong-headed decision. And so I looked at it from a variety of angles. I think what sits in the center of this, maybe not the center, but an important piece of this, are a couple of things. One is the cynicism around pitting Black and Latino applicants against Asian American applicants. That's deeply cynical and troubling. The other is that the facts don't line up with the decision that they made. And so to give you an example, if you look at the makeup of the racial and ethnic makeup of Harvard College in 2022, 46% of the students enrolled are white. 22% are Asian or Asian American. And about 10.7% are Black or African American. And then another 10% are Hispanic or Latino. If you look at UNC, 63% of the students enrolled are white. 22% are Asian. Blacks and Latinos represent 10% each. So the notion that Blacks and Latinos with that small percentages was somehow taking seats away that would ordinarily go to Asians or Asian Americans doesn't bear up in those numbers. And in fact, if anyone's taking those seats away, it is the white enrolled students, not the Black or the Latino students. And so it just doesn't hold up.
Well, it doesn't. I'm sorry, Marjorie.
No, I was just going to say, I didn't know this. Maybe I should have. But when I was reading your piece, that you spent 2 years reading admission things involved with applications at Harvard.
Right.
And so you had the hands-on experience of looking at how it works.
Yeah.
How does it work?
Well, I can tell you how it worked then, at least as I describe it in my piece, as part of Harvard's, amicus brief on behalf of Michigan, is that, first of all, it's very thorough. It's not by numbers. There's one counselor who will review a particular applicant, and then maybe 2 or 3 admissions folks will review that. And then it goes to a larger subcommittee if they believe that applicant should also be considered further. And then the role that I played is there was Harvard have faculty admissions committee, and we would review those with respect to particular disciplines. So my discipline was humanities, and so for students who expressed or seemed to express an interest in humanities, we would review it, and then it gets another review by the full committee, and then a decision is made. None of this is rote. None of this is done with a kind of check the box.
Yeah.
It's very thorough and very considerate. And of course, race is one component of many components. Only one. It's not the determining one, it's not the deciding one, but only one of several components that are used to admit or not to admit a student.
By the way, the piece we're talking about, written by Lee Pelton, who said at the Boston Foundation, as Marjorie said, is The Magic Kingdom. It's going to be on your website tomorrow, from what I understand,
We're going to put it,
tbf.org.
yeah, we'll be on the website.
It's terrific.
Yeah.
It's one of the most comprehensive and thorough pieces I've seen since the repeal of affirmative action as a consideration, as Lee said, not the consideration, by the Supreme Court happened. One of the things that hasn't been discussed nearly enough, you address, and you also quote Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Brown Jackson, about this, is the carve-out that the Supreme Court chose to do for members of the military. Could you explain the reasoning and then your response to the reasoning, Lee Pelton?
Well, it's embarrassing, and you know that Roberts said that there would be a carve-out for military academies. Again, this is higher education. Be a carve-out for these parts of the higher education, because they wanted to make sure that that the leadership of the diversity of leadership match the diversity of the troops. What? I mean, we should, that's the whole purpose of what folks are doing at Harvard and UNC, because we know that part of the virtue of the diversity programs is to create a pipeline for leadership. That's one of their primary purposes, and that's what's under threat here. And by the way, in 2003, against the famous University of Michigan case, the Grutter case, it had strong support from corporate America and from the military. And one of the amicus briefs said that we want to make sure that we can promote diversity.
I want you to say in a second, if you can, what Grutter, you also got into what Grutter did and didn't say, and how the court may have misinterpreted what they did. But no, I want to read what Ketanji Brown Jackson said.
I love
you
this.
quote Jackson, and she didn't have to stutter through it. You almost were speechless there. She may have been. Here's what Associate Justice Brown Jackson, the newest member of the court, said. The court has come to rest on the bottom line conclusion that racial diversity in higher education is only worth potentially preserving insofar as it might be needed to prepare Black Americans and other unrepresented minorities for success in the bunker, not the boardroom, a particularly awkward place to land in light of the history the majority opts to ignore. It'd be deeply unfortunate if the Equal Protection Clause actually demanded this perverse, ahistorical, and counterproductive outcome to impose this result in this clause's name, 14th Amendment, when it requires no such thing and to thereby obstruct our collective progress towards the full realization of the clause's promise, is truly a tragedy for us all. I mean, it couldn't be said any more powerfully.
And also, forget the legal thing for a second. When I heard that, I thought, so you're good enough to go out and fight and die for your country, but you're not good enough to go, I mean, that's how it came across to me, like very, very racist.
Well, the other piece in this is, because she used the words that I use, that the court's view, and I think when Judge Gertner was here, she described their interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause as idiosyncratic or something like that. I think it's perverse and historical. So the 14th Amendment, which was passed in July of 1868, had several clauses, but the one that's most often cited is the Equal Protection Clause, which was primarily to provide equal protection for formerly enslaved folks so that they can enjoy the rights and privileges and benefits of being citizens, full citizens.
Right.
That was the purpose of the Equal Protection Clause. It was not meant to give equal protection to folks who already had equal protection under the law. And so it really, as I said, this was a foregone conclusion among the board, especially among Clarence Thomas, who
a beneficiary of affirmative action. Of course.
And that we could talk about that as well. But he's a beneficiary, but deeply aggrieved by having benefited from it. So it's the use. This is why she says that the use of the Equal Protection Clause is in fact ahistorical. Wrestled out of its history, and it's really perverse because it produces an outcome that is just the opposite of what the Equal Protection Clause.
Could you say we could talk about it? How about talking about it for a minute, about how Clarence Thomas ends up in this place?
Well, this is difficult. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't ever pretend to be. But you have to ask yourself this question. Why is it that a person who has publicly acknowledged, even in his autobiography, that he benefited from affirmative action and should be today so opposed to it? That's the question.
And what is your answer? Even
well,
though
he tells us what the answer is. It's because he felt that he was being stigmatized by affirmative action, and to this day. But what he doesn't say he was being stigmatized not by his black classmates, but by his white classmates, white faculty, and white folks generally. That was a deeply troubling aspect of this for him. And I think what's troubling for me is that whiteness was the standard for him.
Right.
And it continues to be the standard for him in terms of ability and talent. And, we could speculate on why that is the case and what's in the mind of a person who thinks that way. But that's the only thing that one can conclude.
Well, I'm not a psychologist either, but I've seen enough frontline documentaries of his life and read enough of his life. He had a really screwed up childhood, and I think sometimes if you have a really screwed up childhood and you don't deal with that, it doesn't bode well for later, the bitterness. And I think there's something going on there with that too.
Well, he's a sort of bootstrap, guy, and he had a grandfather. Yep. Who was very much that way, that, you use your own talents and inner resources and so on to pull yourself up out of poverty to where he is. So that ethic is very strong in him, and it's a compelling part of his reasoning. I mean, if you want to think about it, this is not a judicial outcome. It's not a judicial court. For him, it's really, he is seeking to resolve some deep personal issues, yes. And he's doing it on the back of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And that's perverse from my point of view.
So we're talking to Lee Pelton, whose piece, again, will be at TBF, the Boston Foundation, tbf.org tomorrow, post. It's called The Magic Kingdom, How the Supreme Court Got It Wrong in its landmark affirmative action ruling. Near the end of your piece, Lee Pelton, you say, and there is potential for more challenges going forward. I'll just read a couple of bullets you put in there. Will the ruling lead to many more so-called reverse racism suits? Will employers be deterred or even prohibited from participating in DEI programs that provide race-conscious preferences in recruitment, hiring, retention, or promotion? Will corporate boards withdraw support for their environment, sustainability, governance objectives because they include efforts to include increase diversity in corporate practices? Well, your impression, as you probably know, in the last couple of days, 13 attorneys general from Republican states have sent a letter to the CEOs of the 100 biggest corporations in America warning of the legal consequences of using race as a factor in hiring and employment practices. So this may just be the beginning of what the Supreme Court intends to do with affirmative action anywhere.
Well, it could be. I think they'll have their case is very fragile because this constitutionally, the affirmative action case rested on Title VI of that amendment, whereas they're making reference, of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and what they're referring to is not Title VI, it's Title VII, I believe, of the Civil Rights, which prohibits discrimination in employment and so on.
But you just described, and you write beautifully and powerfully in your piece about how they perverted the actual intent of the 14th Amendment.
Right.
So clearly, this is the classic example. We learned this in law school, that unfortunately there are a lot of judges in this world who decide, here's where I want to end up. Let me try to figure out a way to get from here to there. And to me, at least, that's what this Supreme Court does. They have a political objective, and they figure out a way contorting the law to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a threat. There's no doubt it's a threat. And I think corporations and nonprofits, we all have to be prepared for those threats. And but the one thing that we can't do is...
Cannot do?
One of the things that we cannot do is to give up on our efforts, our diversity efforts. We must do that.
And you make some suggestions about how we can do that at the end of the piece.
So-called race-neutral things.
Yeah,
right?
You talked about zip codes and socioeconomic stuff, which is possible, right?
Yes.
But here's what I want to... I'm always fascinated, I guess because I put more stock in the Supreme Court than I should have, and obviously I've been disillusioned of late, but that they're very smart people. Thomas may have some psychological problems, I don't really know, but what's going on here? I mean, they can't be so blind. Roberts, Gorsuch, maybe Alito, I don't know, but they know the country's racist. They know that there's discrimination in the justice system. They know these things. So what?
But they don't.
You don't think they do?
No, they don't. I mean, remember, this was all based in part on being in a colorblind society. I mean, Roberts made that very clear. The justices made that very clear. We live in a colorblind society.
And you think they believe that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that race plays, race plays no part here.
But I guess how can they believe that? How can they believe that when they've looked at, the George Floyd killing, the Black Lives Matter, the statistics coming out of the Justice Department, the statistics coming out of the cops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't know. You'd have to ask, but they make that very clear. Roberts says that we live in a colorblind society and that race has, it has no. It shouldn't be.
Can I respectfully disagree with the head of the Boston Foundation? And I don't know either. He did say it. I don't believe they believe for a second. I'm there with Marjorie. I think they see the power of white America slipping away, and there's an effort to make sure that white America, powerful white America, stays in power as long as it possibly can. And this is yet another last gasp to get there.
I essentially say that in that piece, but if you ask me, but the other piece of this, and that you raised it, is that this premise is based on a zero-sum game.
I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
Based on that means if one entity wins, the other one loses, and that basis, the zero-sum thinking, is what brought us Jim Crowism in America, because you had poor blacks and poor whites who had similar sorts of conditions and should have had similar sorts of economic interest. But the zero-sum thinking there, which was promulgated by politiciians and so on, which we've seen lately in the previous president and his office, and also I go back to some other presidents before him. But it's a way to divide. It was a way to divide poor whites from poor blacks.
Yeah.
And Jim Crowism, so the white person could say, well, I may be poor, but I'm not black, and that's worse. And as Reverend Barber, I don't know if you know who he is.
Oh, he's
William
on our
Barber.
show a couple of years ago, right after he spoke at the Democratic Convention.
So
what a presence!
He asked this question. He said, what myth would allow you to vote from somebody who's going to tell you to your face he's going to take away your health care, right? It is this zero-sum thinking that does that. That's the myth.
So before you go, we only have a minute left.
Wait a minute. It's the myth that people believe the zero-sum thinking, so that's why they buy the myth.
Yes, right.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? We know we've talked to you about your work on reparations over there. What's the Boston Foundation doing in response to some of the concerns you raise in your piece, Lee Pelton?
Well, we're going to continue our program on reparations going forward. We have this, I think I've mentioned it before, this 36-person partnership to close the racial wealth gap. Includes bankers and finance people and analysts and so on. And so we're working towards a conclusion there with where our focus is. It's going to be focused on boosting home ownership. Because as part of wealth equity. And we're going to have a series of presentations around closing the racial wealth gap this year and some other things.
Terrific. Well, the piece you wrote, again, it'll be at tbf.org tomorrow. It's terrific. It's really, you learn a lot. Check it out.
We've been speaking with Lee Pelton, President and CEO of the Boston Foundation. He previously served as the 12th president of Emerson College. You have the thing in front of you, Jim, so.
Yeah, there's this, tomorrow night is this town hall that is sponsored by Get Connected and GBH World. It's chaired by our colleague Paris Alston, 6 to 7:30. You can attend in person or virtually. However, and Lee is on at least one of the panels, but you must, reservations are required, and you go to gbh.org www.bbc.com/events.
Yeah, you can go in person or you can watch it online.
You can, but you got to register.
Got to register, absolutely. Thank you very much, Lee
Good to see you,
Pelton, as
Lee
always,
Pelton.
for being here. Coming up, we're going to get a preview of the Boston Landmarks Orchestra Summer Concert Series with music director Christopher Wilkins and Fabiola Mendez. Christopher Wilkins is back again. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Marjorie has said I've been in a rotten mood all day. It's her fault. But I was just told something is going to happen in the next few minutes that has lifted my spirits big time, I should say. Oh, you'll find out why in a second. Another summer's here. That means another great season of free music, courtesy of the great Boston Landmarks Orchestra. In addition to the usual slate of seasonal shows at the Hatch Shell and the Esplanade, also a concert at the end of July over in Chelsea, as well as a special show to coincide with next week's NAACP convention, and others also in neighborhoods. We'll talk about that. Boston Landmarks Orchestra's music director, Christopher Wilkins, is back. Good to see you. Christopher, how are you?
I'm excellent.
This is the happy part. Not that I'm not happy. Christopher is here. Also at the interview desk, Boston Landmarks artist in residence, Quattrista, did I get that right? Fabiola Mendez, who brought her quattro with her, which we didn't know she was going to do. She's working on a show, and she's going to play in a minute with kids from the Hyde Square Task Force, August 12th at the Hatch Shell. Hyde Square Task Force, the name rings a bell. We had the kids on who did the fabulous work around the supermarket stuff. They were just brilliant. Fabiola and Christopher, it's great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
We're thrilled to have you here. So, Christopher, just tell people who may not know, especially emphasizing that word free, what the Landmarks Orchestra is all about.
Well, the original idea was around placemaking, really.
Pull your mic up just to drop. That's it. Thank you.
That the Landmarks Orchestra would move around interesting parts of Boston and enhance these spaces, and the spaces in turn would enhance people's pleasure in listening to music. So, for example, performing South Pacific in the Charlestown Navy Yard, or my first experience conducting the orchestra was the finale of the Beethoven Ninth in Fenway Park. But what we've come to now really is sort of being a voice for all of Boston. You know, lift every voice is the idea. And so representation to the best extent we can make it happen, and kids and people of all ages from all neighborhoods participating in what we do. And that's what leads into Fabi's current project.
You're an artist in residence. What does that mean, Fabiola? Could you explain that to us, please?
That can mean many different things, but in this case, I'm working sort of representing the orchestra with this community center, and we've been working on a piece with the students that they've composed for the orchestra to be performed at this event on August 12th.
Where's that going to be, by the way?
That's going to be at the Hatch Shell.
Okay, what are you holding in your hands
So this is the cuatro. It's a Puerto Rican folk guitar, and it is my principal instrument. I had the opportunity of attending Berkeley and graduating with this instrument, and it's what's opened many doors for me, including being an artist in residence with the orchestra, and not only doing the work with the youth, but also performing alongside the orchestra with the cuatro, leading. So that's super exciting.
So what's the difference between that and a guitar, regular old guitar that kids might have played when they were kids?
So this instrument is actually called cuatro because it originally had 4 strings when it was first developed. Now it has 5 double. So I always like to say that it's like if a mandolin and a guitar had a baby. So it's double strings, one less string on the guitar. The guitar has 6. This has 5 double, technically 10. So it's a lot harder when you're changing strings.
Why is it called the quintro? No, I'm serious. I'm sure you've heard that before.
I know.
Why isn't
it's
it?
not because we don't know how to count.
Okay.
It is because I guess everyone was calling it quattro already. They keep changing the amount of strings, and no one wanted to change the name.
Okay, so before Fabiola is kind enough to play for us again, which was a surprise, which we're totally thrilled about, tell us about the summer program and what you're focusing on there, Christopher.
Well, as usual, it's a really eclectic mix. I mean, a major focus certainly is the NAACP convention. On July 26th, we're performing Wednesday night, a program entirely of music by black women, American composers.
Stay on that. Don't gloss over that for a second, because that is a fairly rare kind of thing.
I've never heard of it before, honestly. Any orchestra in America probably happened, but I'm not certain that it's ever happened. Here's a statistic for you. From 2015 to 2022, so during a heightened awareness of racial and gender equity, American orchestras' performances of music by living composers, female composers of color, increased by 1,050%.
Wow.
From 0.4% to 4.6%. Now, what percentage of the largest U.S. cities' population, what percentage do you think are women of color? 35%. So, as I like to say, the tide has turned, but what we need is a sea change. So this is the beginning of something really exciting. And we're performing works by 9 different female black composers.
And that's it's the first night, I think, I'm not sure,
right.
of the NAA. And by the way, Tanisha Sullivan, who's head of the Boston chapter, is going to be with us in a few minutes, talk more about the convention coming, which is open to all, coming next. Where's that performance going to be?
That's also at the Hatch Shell, and I just want to give a plug. On Monday night previous, so on the 24th, Dr. Emmett G. Price III is hosting a community conversation around this subject. And Terry Lynn Carrington, who's our principal guest artist on Wednesday night, and her work will be discussed.
Grammy Award-winning drummer of incredible skills, yes?
Yeah, multiple Grammy Award winner. And she has an art show also that she's curated at the gallery, the Video Media Gallery at Emerson College now as well.
That's great.
You know, we've talked about this before, that there's been very little representation of women in general, never mind black women of color or any kind of, and conductors. We all saw that movie Tar. You know, about kind of a woman that seemed a little bit overwrought in her career. But I mean, and you thought to yourself, where have I seen other women conductors? Very few.
Well, until recently, and it started to change, but so it's people like me who've been making the choices. So men have been chosen as our representatives because the men are making the decision. So that's changing slowly, and these collaborations are incredibly helpful in terms of getting new decision makers and new voices into the discussion.
Fabiola, before you play for a second, only because we've totally fell in love with the kids, I hope it's okay to call them kids. They are kids.
Yes.
At the Hyde Square Task Force. Tell us a little bit more about this August 12th thing that they and you are working collaboratively on.
So it's been a beautiful experience to work with them. They're so creative, and even though some of them don't have a lot of music theory background, we've been able to, music is a universal language. So through sound, we've been able to decide, we like this here, we don't like this here. We worked on the lyrics, we worked on what we wanted to convey, what we wanted to say. It's a bilingual piece, so it represents, the Latino heritage, but also the fact that they're in the United States. Once we started working on the orchestration of it, that's when everything just went to the next level. And seeing their eyes, the first time we heard the first pass of the orchestral arrangement, they were like, what? I can't even believe that's what we came up with, and it sounds like that now. So please come join us on August 12th. It's going to be super, super exciting for them and for us.
What are you playing now?
I'll be playing a traditional piece, instrumental. It's called Aguinaldo Jíbaro.
And can we just say in advance, since we didn't know that Fabiola was going to be kind enough to play, we don't have our usual brilliant colleagues doing sound here, so it's not going to be quite as perfect as it ordinarily is from the library, but we didn't want to pass up the opportunity. Fabiola Mendez, here she is. That was pretty good.
That was wonderful. You know,
That was great.
the other thing I've noticed, we were talking to great musicians, and obviously you were really something on that. You started very young, like at 6 years old. A lot of people talk about starting very young. Andres Nelson's came in here and said he saw a symphony when he was 5 years old, and that was it. All he wanted to do, trumpet, and then is that generally true? I mean, if you don't start by 12, are you all washed up?
No, it's never too late. I mean, it's definitely easier when you're a sponge, when you're little and everything is just supernatural. But it's never late. It's never late to learn.
6 years old. How come you started at 6 years old?
My dad would sit with me. We would practice for 30 minutes, and that felt like a very long time because I wanted to play with Barbies. So, I'm very grateful that my family, taught me discipline and was supportive of the artistic endeavor.
It's an amazing instrument. Amazing player.
Thank you.
Do you want to hear any sound from the...
Well, that's good. Can we get to that in a second?
Yes.
Just talk, Christopher, you also, one of the things that's great is you go out to the communities too. Could you share with us a little bit about how that plays out over the summer?
Well, that's part of how we get representation on our stage is to partner with organizations and artists across the city. So, I mean, we've worked with Camp Harbor View, and we've worked with also institutions like the New England Aquarium and the Museum of Science and so forth. And what we'll typically do is come up with projects where kids or people of whatever age can develop something that they can then bring to the Hat Shell. Because while every concert we give is free, and we do everything we can think of to eliminate barriers of access, we can't make people come. So what we do is develop these kind of partnerships. I mean, a good example is our final night on August 23rd is our dance night. Dance is a wonderful way in which we can represent different cultures. So we have an Armenian dance troupe, Sayat Nova, world famous here from the Boston area. We have Jean Apollon, whose company is rooted both in Boston and in Haiti with Haitian dance. And we have a wonderful dancer from Boston Ballet. So it's sort of creating these partnerships where people can bring their talent and collaborate with us.
Do you have any I know you've been doing this forever, and I think it was, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when Mark Volpe was running the BSO, that the BSO and the Pops went out, I think it was to Franklin Park. And I can't remember, right after that, either Keith Lockhart was here or Andres Nelson, whoever it was, said it was the single greatest experience they'd had. He had had, I can't remember which of them, my apologies, it was who said that, and it was clearly heartfelt. But does it translate? I know what the goal is. The goal is to bring the music out to people who aren't traditionally going to be gone to this kind of music, and hopefully lure them in. By the way, when you go, it is totally different from just listening. When you see the players, it's like watching, by the way, it's beautiful watching you as listening. I'm serious. You were so into it, and it's just beautiful. But does it translate? Do kids particularly who otherwise wouldn't listen to this, do they get connected, and does it last?
Yeah, I think so. We have a huge advantage in that we're outside, it's free, we're in the grass, we're along the river, people are coming along in their bicycles or walking their dogs, and suddenly they hear, right, God, there's an 80-piece orchestra, what are they doing here? And they stop and they hang out. But then we also set up activities for kids to do before the concert, and during the concert, by the way, we have this station we call the Maestro Zone. So it's a music stand with a podium, with the music of the night, and a professional conductor there to give them lessons, and they're waving along to the music and that kind of. I mean, you can't do that in Symphony Hall. That's a terrible distraction. But for us, and by the way, people do bring their dogs. They're invited to bring their dogs. We're part of the DCR, so it's a state park, and it's always free and open.
By the way, we have a little bit of sound. You sent us some sound from 2023, your Juneteenth concert, and here's soprano Sigourney Cook singing Deep River. Are you kidding me? Oh my God. Sigourney Cook singing Deep River.
Yeah,
Jesus.
I can't do that. All I can do is extend the invitation.
You know, when you spoke about being outside, I'm embarrassed to say I never found out who it was, but I remember during the pandemic walking on Jamaica Pond, and we were all, this was even before we had masks, and everybody was supposed to be very far apart, and there was an orchestra rehearsing. Everybody was like 6 feet apart. There must have been about 25 members. But it was so neat because you didn't expect it, and you could hear them. They were up a bit in the hill, and there must have been, the time I walked up there, I'm such a jerk, I didn't find out who it was, but the time I walked up there must have been like 200 people just sitting there in their jogging outfits or with their dogs because they've been walking their dog or whatever, listening to this orchestra in the middle of Jamaica Pond.
So, Christopher, since you weren't there, please tell us who Marjorie was listening to. Can you tell us?
Well, they were just group rehearsing.
I know. Well, every orchestra got innovative. You know, we did a lot of streaming stuff where we distanced or had remote musicians, remember, from the rooftop of Beacon Hill.
I do.
But again, it was an advantage to be outside. We were one of the first orchestras in the East Coast to be back giving live music because we were outdoors. It helped
That was
a
the
lot.
point I was trying to make,
I know.
Jim.
I was only kidding.
How wonderful
I'll find out.
it is to be outside. Well, it's okay. You don't have to find out. But the point was that it's outside, and people just kind of gravitated to it like a magnet. You know, it was just a really neat thing to see.
Fabiola, when you're not artist in residence, what are you doing?
I'm writing music for TV. I'm actually one of the writers for Wombats.
We love Wombats.
That's
we love
great.
that.
Yes,
That's great.
and I also write for Alma's Way, which is also on PBS Kids.
Yep.
So I'm doing a lot of work with youth and music and culture and representation on the Quattro, of course.
Well, you've been all over the place. At the Metropolitan Museum of Art, we've got here, Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston, Celebrity Series of Boston, New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, the Isabella Stewart Garden Museum. You've been every place. And you got the Quincy Jones Award.
Yes.
What is that about?
Well, that was a composition award I got while I was studying at Berkeley. And it was one of those first, pat in the back that it's like, okay, you can keep going. There's something good here.
Yeah.
Fabi was the first graduate of Berkeley with a concentration on the Quattro.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Which is traditional in Puerto Rico.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a folk guitar.
Yeah, yeah. We had Juan Niz on Friday, and they were doing
I heard,
and head of the Puerto Rican festival, and he came in and gave us a wonderful performance on it as well. I mean, you look at it, and of course, you think it's a guitar, and then you see all the little strings closer together. And by the way, what difference does that make in terms of what you can do with the instrument with the extra strings?
Well, it doesn't really. It's more of a tone thing. But in particular, the top three strings are the same tone or the same note. So the strings are the same. But if I was to play the bottom of the instrument, the strings, one is thicker than the other, so it creates a different tone.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's kind of unique. But in terms of the notes and everything, I'm pressing both strings at the same time. So it's more of a tone thing.
So, Christopher, if people want to find out about where you are, when you are, what you're playing, all that sort of thing, where do people go?
We're the Boston Landmarks Orchestra. Landmarksorchestra.org is the website. We launch on Wednesday night, so night after tomorrow night.
That would be tomorrow night.
Wednesday night at the Hat Shell. And Fabi and company are on August 12th.
That's correct.
The NAACP program is a week from tomorrow night.
And where do we find you when we don't find you on August 12th?
FabiolaMendezMusic.com and also Fabiola Mendez Music on all social media. My music is also on Spotify and all those digital platforms. You can just type Fabiola Mendez and listen to more Quattro.
Are you as happy playing that thing as you appear to be, or is it all an act?
It's part of me.
It is really.
If I don't have it on, I just feel like I'm unprotected.
Yeah.
Can I really impose? Could you do something? Is that you weren't supposed to do anything, but could you do another minute?
Of course.
Would you really? That'd be so
yes,
great.
How about
I
with
will.
a vocal?
I will.
You will? Oh,
Yes.
my gosh.
I think it can project.
You can leave the headset on, we're
for
told.
that, yep.
Okay, so the
Fabiola
Quattro, okay.
Mendez, yet again, a wonderful surprise.
Awesome. This song is called Dedicatoria, and it's a tribute to the female figures in my life who have been inspirational. A mi abuela, la fundadora de la ternura. A mi madre, fuente de vida inagotable. a Silvia y a Julia por la canción interminable, a Lolita Lebrón por la fiereza, por lo que han hecho de mí como animal terrícola, hembra americana, antillana, boricua, por lo que han hecho de mí como animal terrícola, hembra americana, antillana, boricua, para siempre, para siempre.
Whoa.
That was terrific.
Okay, that was Fabiola Mendez, whose music you can find on Spotify or wherever you get your music. Fabiola Mendez, Mendes. And we've been speaking, of course.
Z.
Oh, excuse me. Mendez. You are correct. I'm sorry. My apologies. It's right in front of me, and I read it wrong. That's a bad sign.
You were so excited. So was I.
We've been speaking as well with the Boston Landmarks Orchestra's Christopher Wilkins and artist in residence, we said, Fabiola Mendez. Her performance with kids from Hyde Square Task Force will be August 12th on the Hat Shell. But you guys are starting tomorrow night, right? That's right.
Environmental program.
That's right. And on the Hat Shell, if you want to get more information on tomorrow and all the performance for the summer season, go to landmarksorchestra.org. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful treat.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up, the Trustees of Reservations is the nation's first and state's largest land preservation nonprofit, and it's got a new CEO who's going to be with us in just a second to discuss public space conservation in the face of climate change. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting from the Boston Public Library and streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Katie Theoharides. She's the new CEO just this month of the Trustees of Reservations, the state's largest preservation nonprofit. Congratulations and welcome, Katie. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. I'm always so embarrassed by what I don't know, even when it's my own backyard. So tell people, I can't be the only person that doesn't know about the Trustees of Reservations. Tell us about it.
So the Trustees was founded in 1891 by Charles Eliot with the idea that we needed landscapes to get out to, and that as industrialization was happening and the land in Boston was really being developed, people needed special bits of scenery to provide restorative, restoration for their mental health, for their physical health, places to go out and visit that could really bring us that sense of landscape into our life. And so the Trustees has been connecting people to nature, and that's a really important part of their mission since that founding, and now own over 120 reservations statewide that provide public access to residents across the Commonwealth.
Like what, give people examples. Some of them are so high profile we've all been to, but give us an example of the spectrum of things on your watch.
Yeah, so Crane Beach is one many people might be familiar with. It's a beautiful beach up in Ipswich on the North Shore.
That's the place with the green flies?
It does sometimes have green flies. It does sometimes have green flies, but it also has beautiful coastal dunes you can hike in and great swimming. But where I'm from, out in Western Mass, it also has a number of properties, including a great one called Chapel Brook, which is a beautiful waterfall coming down, cascading out of the hill towns in the region of the state that was just experienced really significant flooding.
Yeah,
so it has properties like that. And then we also have things like the De Cordova that celebrates art and art in the landscape and other ways of connecting people through nature and art and culture to our outdoor resources through meeting people where they are and really bringing them into the outdoor space.
You know, speaking of flooding in Western Mass, and before that we had the so shocking flooding of Montpelier, Vermont.
Yes.
You're coming into this at a time when there's threats to a lot of these places. The Globe had a map of all these dams that we're all close to, and a lot of them, if not most of them, are not in very good shape. So how does that impact the trustees and what you've got to do?
Yes, well, absolutely. And climate resiliency is actually my formal education. I've been working on this for 20 years of my life. But from a trustee's perspective, what it means is we need to start to think, and we are already doing this, differently about how we're planning our resources for climate change, and whether that's looking at coastal restoration to make our beaches and marshlands more resilient to sea level rise and storm surge, or protecting floodplain forests that help protect farms and towns behind them, or thinking about the infrastructure we're siting on properties and making sure we're lifting it up. But I think it also provides an opportunity for the trustees to serve particularly urban populations as the climate changes. So things like green space in urban areas that residents can access. And you know, we saw this during the pandemic with residents who didn't have air conditioning.
Yes.
Certain parks weren't open, other libraries weren't open, places weren't open. But if you have parks that are accessible with trees and water features and other cooling relief, that's going to be really important in a climate change future.
Well, that's one of the things I didn't know about either, and I probably should have. That you were working on with Charlie Baker, this urban.
Did I even say that you were the climate czar and the secretary of environmental affairs and whatever for Governor Baker?
That's right.
Yes.
She was the climate czar. I like that. It sounds very powerful. She's the climate czar. But what's it called? It's called the urban something or other. That's gone from like 0 to 95% of the towns are now and cities have a.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
So our municipal vulnerability preparedness program, which before I was secretary, I was brought into the administration to work on climate resiliency efforts. And the idea was, we're doing a lot on climate resiliency, but it's not connected. And cities and towns across the state need resources to do this work. And so we built a program that now the Healy administration is continuing, which is fantastic. And in the first 3 years, we brought 95% of cities and towns into the program. And it's a partnership where you identify your risks from climate change, plan for it, and then the state provides significant funding to make sure you can do the projects. But it's state-local partnership. And then a key part of it is it's not just physical infrastructure, it's also your land and natural resources that can provide a lot of those benefits while providing access to open space and refuge for biodiversity and wildlife.
That's the voice of Katie Theoharides, who's the new CEO of the Trustees of Reservations. That was in your time working in the Baker administration, but you touched on the fact you're also doing some urban things. I know one at least in East Boston, in the Trustees, because most of us don't associate the Trustees of Reservations with urban work. Fill in some of those blanks if you can, Katie.
Yeah, so a big part of our focus and mission is providing that access to people, and the most people now are in urban locations, and we really want to connect people to our landscapes, to engaging in experiences that bring them into connection with nature. And so in East Boston, we're working on a project called Piers Park 3. It's down by Piers Park 1, which is an existing park on the waterfront. And the idea is to provide access to the waterfront. There aren't many places in East Boston you can go down and touch the harbor. This would be one of them. And we would also be helping to build resiliency and access for a population that really needs access to parks.
You mentioned when you started the importance of nature in terms of people's mental and physical health. What do we know about the importance of nature?
Well, we know that people heal faster when they're in a hospital bed next to a tree out their window.
Really?
Yes. We know that, and I wish I had a list of all the factoids with me, but we know that in communities that have green space, there are often less arrests. There are less issues. We know that in Massachusetts alone, the outdoor recreation industry is a $10.5 billion GDP for the state. And we know that all of this natural land is our best solution to climate change, both from a sequestering carbon and from a resiliency side. So all across the board, the natural land we have really provides a suite of benefits. I think that we saw in sort of painstaking detail during the pandemic just how many people needed to get outside, needed to connect with each other, and the outdoors was a safe place to do it. And at the trustees, our membership doubled during that period.
Really?
Yes.
You know, Katie, in a minute, I'm going to ask you if I have to get in line now to go to Crane Beach on Saturday, and you can get to that in a second. I know you're crazy to talk about your predecessor, but one concern, your predecessor was there for 8 months, and at least in terms of it was one of those, at least according to the Globe, one of those differences of opinion or whatever between the board and this guy judge. But what the Globe said that his two priorities, which matter a lot to us, and I appear from what I've read about you to you, climate and DEI kinds of things were at the top of his list. So that makes me nervous, and you have to disabuse me of my anxiety about where the trustees of reservations is on these issues. That was not the basis for this parting of the ways, I assume.
No, and the board has thanked John for his service, and I know, for me, a real focus is moving forward with the staff who've been through a number of leadership transitions and looking at the future. But in that future, climate change, diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity, providing expanded access, and continuing to really focus on conserving our natural landscape are key pieces of the work ahead.
So what are you doing about the nightmare of parking at places like Crane Beach and other? I don't know if you read the stuff, the brilliant stuff. One of our colleagues, Chris Burrell, has done wonderful work about access or lack of access to beaches. One of the statistics he came up with, one of the statistics he reported on is only 12% of the beaches in Massachusetts, the vast majority of which obviously are not under your jurisdiction. We're not blaming you for this.
Fred, it's Katie's fault.
Are available to the public, meaning 88% are not. What are you doing to make sure that non-residents of the area have at least some shot at access?
So we do own 75 miles of coastline, and our mission is to provide
75 miles.
75. We're the largest coastal landowner other than the government.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we provide access to our lands on the beach, and in some locations we're the only one in the nearby vicinity providing public access. But Crane Beach is one of those beaches that did get very busy during the pandemic, and the team put a ticketed system in place. And also there's a beach permit, and next year the permit is phasing out, but the ticketing will continue.
Permits for local people, is that right?
No, the permitting, you can buy
if you're a trustee
can buy a beach permit with a trustee's membership. But what we've found is that if you own sort of a season pass or a beach permit, sometimes you reserve a spot for the day, but then don't
show up.
And so what we want to make sure is that it's a pay-as-you-go system, so that people who are really committed to going to the beach that day are the ones who go.
So what do members get? What people that join the organization? What are the benefits?
It depends on the membership level, but it's access to our properties and then an opportunity for discounts at a beach like Crane Beach or the pass in the past, but that will change now to a discount.
This might not even be in the trustees' purview, but you were in the Baker administration. Jim talked about, our colleague Chris Burrell has done all this great stuff here at WGBH, talking about how you can't get. We're unusual in Massachusetts. I think he listed Maine, Delaware, and Virginia are the only other ocean-facing states that allow private ownership all the way to the tide line. So it's a big deal, because if you're walking in a big beach and you leave the public part of the beach and you walk over where people have houses. I mean, I never heard of this, but apparently some people come out and scream and yell at you for just walking there or stopping there for a second. Is that something, I was surprised to learn that we're unusual in that. So is that something that people are thinking about either when you were with the Baker administration or now with the trustees about opening up more beach space besides your 75 miles?
I mean, we'll certainly be looking for more opportunities to protect open spaces where we can provide that access. But I think it is a larger policy conversation that we should be having as a state around how we provide equitable access to the waterfront. And also, as climate change brings those seas closer and sort of shrinks the land that's available between the tide lines.
Yes.
And how do we do that? And how do we also hit our other mission areas like protecting shoreline wildlife, like migratory birds that are critically important and that we do have to protect on the beaches.
You know, the legal problem with this, which we discussed with Chris, at least those who would oppose this, the landowners, is whether or not this is a taking, because there's legislation on Beacon Hill that would change what the dividing line is, and the question is, you're taking property without compensation.
But there's also the issue about state money.
Well, I want to talk about that.
Yes.
This is really not, I don't think, in your trustees' hat, and tell me if it is, but rather in your sort of lifelong work and Baker administration stuff. There's also proposals Marjorie hinted on Beacon Hill that would suggest, and there's no sense that it's going anywhere yet, if ever, that if you receive state money, for whatever reason, mostly climate-related reasons, then the quid pro quo is you must open up your beach, your access, whatever, to the public. Is there any argument against that? I know there are only so many spaces. That is a zero-sum game as opposed to what Lee Pelton was describing around affirmative action before. Is there any argument against that?
I think it becomes an increasingly hard argument to make because, you know, I saw the need in my secretary role for example, sand on beaches that were eroding and that we're putting property owners at risk, and the money for that sand often comes from public resources. So I think there is a good argument to be made that if the state is investing in protecting the beach to protect the property behind it, we should be looking at access where taxpayer dollars are going.
You have a wind background too, do you not?
I do have a wind background, yes.
We, many years ago, what's the name of the guy from Cape Wind who was on our show practically every week?
Oh, God, I forget his name.
What was the name? Do you remember the name of the guy who was
He spent years and years and years trying to get...
Cape Wind was the first project, and he fought long and hard, and it never came to fruition. What is the state of the wind industry, where I know not just Baker, but Deval Patrick before him talked about how we should be the national leaders? What are we? Where are we?
We are the national leader in offshore wind in Massachusetts. We have the first utility scale project in the state that was permitted and approved under Governor Baker, and I think the state has also come up with a good model for balancing environmental siting and concerns with permitting the new clean energy we need to really save wildlife and save people in our communities from the greatest impacts of climate change. New York now is also permitting projects, as is New Jersey, and it's something that's happening up and down the eastern seaboard, but it started in Massachusetts.
Are these mobile turbines? Who were we talking about mobile turbines with a couple of months ago? Do you recall?
You're asking me all these questions about what
Maybe
we
it
did
was
a couple of months ago, putting me on the spot.
That's hard.
It might have been McKibben.
He was talking about how up in Vermont people were fighting against having the wind turbines on the land.
Hilltops.
Right,
yes.
I know.
And he was very upset about that because he thought that they're not that bad, and anyway, they're going to help the climate.
But are mobile turbines, is part of the way to address I was a big admirer of Ted Kennedy, but Ted Kennedy was a big obstacle to this for, I think, visual reasons, which is unfortunate. Mobile turbines, which obviously would allow deeper sea kind of stuff, is that the wave of the future? Thank you, Jim. Is that the wave of the future? Or
so by mobile, do you mean floating?
Yeah, floating.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's okay. No, in the Gulf of Maine, which is really deep and has some of the highest wind speeds in the world, the only option is to do floating turbines. And so they're tethered to the seabed. But then they do rock back and forth. And there's a great professor up in Maine working on that technology. But, you know, there are challenges on any side of this issue in terms of siting and making sure you're mitigating any environmental impacts. And I think it sort of represents just the challenge we have ahead working on climate change, with all of the different things we need to balance to make sure we get the work done right.
I always ask, and we're lucky enough to talk to Bill McKibben once a month, or you that's been in this business your whole life, how are you feeling about things? I was thinking, I used to write a column, and I thought if I was writing a column now, I would write a column about place. I was down the Cape where my parents had a summer house, a little cottage for a million years. I've gone there my whole life. And to me, you're thinking, you always worried about maybe you wouldn't be able to afford to keep the house anymore, you couldn't afford to go there, but you never worried about the thing disappearing.
Right.
And now, after Montpelier, which really upset me, you think, not just is this beach going to be here, but is this whole town going to be here? The places you've gone your whole life could disappear. And it really is upsetting. And I'm wondering if you, as an expert, think that there's some optimism here. I mean, even if we stop fossil fuels today, it's going to get worse the next 30 years.
Yeah, we're committed to the impacts of climate change that are already here.
Yeah.
So we can mitigate for the future, but we have to adapt currently. And I think it is unsettling to think about our landscape changing, to think about historical places we've called home looking different in the future.
Places that have been here in Boston
or not being there.
100 years, 200 years, they've been here for 300 years.
Right.
And is this all up for grabs?
Right. But, where I saw the most hope in my last job, and I think where I see opportunity for hope in this job, is in the connection people have to place and their desire to build resiliency for the future. And so we saw so many towns come into our MVP program because they saw the challenges that they were having. And not only did they want to address climate change, but they wanted to build a more resilient community for the future, whether it was food systems during COVID and making sure we're connecting farmers to populations that are hungry, or making sure that businesses have a path forward into the future. And so where I see hope with the trustees is we can be engines of hope on our properties in terms of showing and engaging people in the work of adaptation and resiliency, whether it's a coastal marsh restoration project, or how do you make a really old building, like we have many of in New England, net zero. And as a state, we have to convert 1 million buildings before 2030 to electric, which is a massive undertaking. But if we can start to tackle that and show people solutions for how to do that work, I think there is a lot of reason for hope and a lot of reason for new connection with these solutions.
Okay, can we end by going from the big picture to the smallest picture? What do we do about the greenheads? No, I'm serious about this. They're indestructible.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can put on yourself. And by the way, it's the most beautiful beach anywhere.
It is.
And we love it. And so
it's just a couple of weeks.
But it's hopeless, right?
It's a season, though. It's a season.
So the best solution is to keep protecting the birds and to do our best to protect the migratory shorebirds.
Because the birds eat the greenheads?
The birds eat the greenheads. Oh. And so the better we're able to balance the ecosystem and to keep the biodiversity that lives there, the better we'll be able to control the bugs. So does that mean
if the seagull comes down to take your sub sandwich, you say, enjoy it? Is that pretty much what you're saying?
It's not the seagulls per se.
It's
the piping plovers and the terns and some of the rarer species that really feast on these bugs.
But isn't there just a couple of weeks for the greenheads?
It's just like a 2-week period.
Yeah, it's a 2-week period.
So just
don't
easy
go.
For you to say.
Check your. We usually post information about when the greenheads are at.
Do you really?
We do, I think, and I'll double check on this and get you an answer.
Yes. That's right.
It's certainly marked at the gate when it's a bad day for greenheads.
Yeah, you could go like in a slicker, Jim, or something.
Yeah, I like that look. By the way,
congratulations
congratulations on the job, and we hope you'll come back and see us regularly. We'd love to talk to you.
No, well, this has been my longtime favorite show, and it's
God.
We love that.
It's how I learned about politics when I was a scientist coming into, not knowing Charlie Baker, not knowing the administration. I spent a few weeks listening to this show and got a feel for Boston.
Well, that's perfect. Well, since you say that, that's a perfect thing. The question, I think you're perfectly appropriate to answer. Who do you think you learned more from, Marjorie or me? What's the answer there? What do you think, Katie?
No, I'm not going to answer that question.
No, you can say Jim, then he'll be happy, and if you say me, he'll be very upset. So
I think you guys play off each other very well.
Play off each other very well.
That's the biggest pile of crap I've ever heard in my life.
Maybe next time I'll give you an answer.
Congratulations. We're really glad to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I always love to hear some optimism about the climate. It makes me feel much better about the mess we're in. Thank you very much for coming in. We've been speaking with Katie Theo-Harides. She's the new CEO of the Trustees of Reservations. Coming up next, we'll be joined by the president of the Boston chapter of the NAACP.
Wait a second. Before you go, I forgot. Jamie just reminded me, we're dealing with big issues today. Climate change is one of them, obviously.
Yeah.
Resiliency. At the end of the show, we're dealing with another big issue, which is men wearing Speedos. And the question that one of our colleagues raised, are Speedos allowed and should they be allowed on Crane Beach? Wait a second, we need a mic. Go ahead, say it now.
I assume they are. I don't think we have a dress code on.
Is there any way we can ban them, or is... You'll get back to me on that?
That's not top of my list.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, it's not top of
Thanks for
people's
raising
list,
that
but,
to our colleagues.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie, again. Okay.
She's never coming back after that.
She's never
that's
coming
for
back
sure.
after that. That's right. Well, a lot of people never come back.
That's
They
exactly
come here
right.
once and
I
they never
wonder
come
why
back.
they don't come back.
Okay,
Actually.
we're going to be joined up next by the president of the Boston chapter of the NAACP. We've talked to her before, and she is here back. Tanisha Sullivan, ahead of the national convention, which is coming to Boston in just a few days. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Tanisha Sullivan. Tanisha is the president of Boston chapter of the NAACP. As you know, because we've been talking about it a lot, their national convention is going to be held here in Boston at the end of the month. GBH will be there as a public media partner. Boston Public Radio will be there on Friday. Basic Black will be there Friday afternoon. GBH reporters will be there for the whole time. We're thrilled about it. We're thrilled you're here. Tanisha, it's great to see you.
It is great to be here, Jim and Marjorie. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you. We are in countdown right now. So
you are. So
yeah.
How much anxiety? It's been 40 plus years? How many years?
It actually has been over 40 years. So 1982 was the last time the NAACP convention was physically here in the city of Boston. We were scheduled to be here in 2020, but for COVID.
Yep.
And so we still had a convention. We had some hybrid type events, but we all remember we were in the middle of a public health pandemic, so things were limited.
So give people an idea, overview, what's going to be happening at the
Oh
convention.
my goodness, very exciting. So I have to say this, we're actually kicking off some programming this weekend. This Saturday, July 22nd, our volunteers, we've got hundreds of Bostonians who have volunteered for this convention. We'll be coming together on Saturday to kick off our volunteerism with a day of action and service in communities across the city of Boston.
Oh, nice.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Some of the activations are exciting, and actually picking up on your last conversation, one of them I'm super excited about in Mattapan is really going to focus on the Neponset watershed, and there's some great stories that we can tell about that project as a whole. We'll be activating in Hyde Park, in Dorchester, in Roxbury, and so folks are invited to join us on Saturday. But then next week, oh my goodness. We kick off convention on Wednesday the 26th with our national high school academic and cultural competition. It is called Act So. Phenomenal. We'll have about 1,500 young people, high school students from across the country. They'll
Wow.
be competing in 32 different across 32 disciplines. We're very excited about that.
And by the way, on Wednesday, speaking about it, was not only Katie talking about climate a minute ago, the Boston Landmarks Orchestra was here before Wednesday night. at the Hat Shell, they're featuring 9 black women composers as their program as part of the NAACP as well. You know, when you said, used a pronoun that suggested, I think intentionally, that people should come, this is not just for members of the NAACP. Please broadcast that and make it clear who this is for these days in Boston.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've been very intentional about is it's working to ensure that this is the most inclusive and accessible convention in NAACP history. Now, to put that in context, we've been doing this for 114 years, okay? So we are working really hard to make this inclusive. And so from volunteering, everyone is welcome to our actual programming. So from July 28th through July 30th, at the Boston Convention and Exhibitor Center, we have curated what we're calling the Hub Experience, okay? That's where you all will be in that space, right?
Yep.
So the Hub Experience is free and open to the public from Friday through Sunday. And within the Hub, what folks can expect to experience are various activations. There'll be art activations. There'll be some corporate activations. We'll also have a series of panel discussions. One of the centerpieces that we're really excited about is a career summit. And so we've got about 25 Boston area companies that are participating in that career summit. So it's an opportunity for people to, yes, come down and learn about career opportunities, but we're also going to have some discussions about some of our key industries here in Massachusetts. Very exciting. Music, food, all the things. That's where you're going to want to be.
How do people find out? I mean, you mentioned the Hub. That's how I found it this morning. Where do people go to find out what the agenda is so they know when they want to go? And do you need to register if you want to come if you're not an NAACP member? What's the answer to those things?
Fantastic question. So the best resource right now for information where you're going to see updates first are at the naacp.org/convention website. Okay. That's the national website. And as updates to the schedule are made, we're making them there first as speakers are announced because, we've got the vice president is coming.
Harris, that's a
Hillary
big deal.
Clinton's, and we've got more announcements to come. That's where people want to go. It's also where you can go if you want to register to participate in any of the programming. But again, I do want to make sure folks understand the Hub is free and open to the public, so folks should come on down.
So as you know, we speak to one of your colleagues and your predecessor as head of the Boston chapter, Michael Curry, weekly here. It was when Curry was the president, when Walsh was the mayor, that's when the decision was made to come here. Why did the NAACP, and obviously it's being carried forward by you and now Mayor Wu, why did the NAACP decide that this was the right place? Is it because of the troubling history of Boston, or why did they pick Boston?
Well, I think, look, Boston is one of the most attractive convention locations in the country, period, right? And so anytime you're talking about a convention, I think national convention organizations, you got to look at Boston. That said, when you are the NAACP, an organization that's focused on racial equity, you look at Boston and you say, is Boston ready? Okay, and I think what we have seen is that although we know there's still more work to be done, what we have seen here in Boston is that there have been some concerted efforts to really tackle the racial equity issues that exist here. I will say, and you mentioned Mayor Walsh, he started this journey, was very excited about the convention coming. We know he went on to be Secretary of Labor. I will say he's still continues to be a tremendous partner in helping to ensure that this convention is successful right alongside Mayor Wu.
How has Mayor Wu been? I mean, I've read, and obviously she said all the right things. She was at the press conference a couple of weeks ago, but what's her deal in terms of carrying? No, I'm serious.
What's her deal?
No, there are a lot of politicians. I mean, you ran for Secretary of State. You know this. There are a lot of politicians who like to own good things and don't enough are willing to continue something that was started by somebody else. She's been all in, though, from what I understand.
Look, this convention was coming to Boston no matter what. And one of the things that I really want to lift up is what we've seen, what I've experienced leading the NAACP Boston branch is that Boston is all in. And when I say Boston is all in, when I'm talking about our business community, I'm talking about labor, I'm talking about our community organizations. I have truly been very pleased, honored, and humbled by the way that all of Boston has leaned in. I will also say, and we can't leave it out, how Governor Healy and her administration have leaned in. Her entire cabinet has been tapping in on this convention, as well as our legislature. So this really is our moment as a city, as a commonwealth, to reintroduce ourselves to, quite frankly, Black America. And I feel really confident that we are going to continue to show up, in that after this convention, what we will see is the impact of that convention. The impact of that convention in the discussions that we have, the impact of that convention in the public policy debates that we engage in, and I'm looking forward to, yes, convention, but also what happens after.
We're talking with Tanisha Sullivan, the president of Boston's chapter of the NAACP, and the convention will be here that we're talking about at the end of this month. You know, I don't want to get off the convention, but one of the stories that and you mentioned Michael Curry, Jim, just a second ago, one of the stories talked about your mom and Michael Curry, and I guess they knew each other well. He's known you since you were a little tiny tyke.
Oh, so you're making sure folks know he's a lot older than you.
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
But the story mentioned your mom and something called the Black Pages of New England, which I didn't know about. Tell people about the Black Pages of New England.
Yes. So my mother, truly a trailblazer before her time, back in the late 80s, before we knew this language of diversity, equity, and inclusion, before we were talking about a racial wealth gap in Black businesses. My mother launched, along with a good friend of hers, the Black Pages of New England. The Black Pages was and is really a portal, a repository, if you will, of Black-owned businesses across New England. It was designed to help ensure that those organizations could be connected to one another. You can find each other, refer business to one another. But also, if you think back to the late 80s, early 90s, corporate America was just getting started in this space, right? And so it also served as a resource for some of our corporations to help them identify Black-owned businesses with which they were with which they could do business.
By the way, your father was a trailblazer too. We shouldn't leave in the education world. And I was lucky enough to meet both of them after one of the debates we did with you and Secretary of State
that's
Galvin.
Right. That's right. You told me. You told me you met your mom and dad.
They were great.
I am truly blessed. I have to say that. I'm truly blessed with the two of them. My mother, certainly visionary, focused on economic opportunity, and my dad, 40 years in the Boston Public Schools. My dad started working in Boston Public Schools on the buses in September of 1974.
He was on the buses?
On the buses.
Like a bus monitor?
Yes.
Wow.
And we all know September, that's when the buses started rolling for DSEG.
Tanisha, can we get back to the history of Boston for a second? It was not very long before the National NAACP picked Boston as its site that we all read the horrible survey that was done of Black Americans list the least welcoming cities in America. There were 8 major cities. Boston, by a landslide, came in number 1. We all know what's happened since in terms of leadership, not just in politics, but in the corporate world. Shirley Young wrote beautifully about this the other day. But if you can, are you able to give a picture of what you think the mindset is of the typical delegate who's not a Bostonian, who's coming to our city in the next couple of days, about what Boston is,
Yeah, no, I think that's an important question, because the perception of Boston, whether we like it or not, is that we're not welcoming, that we are, among the most racist cities in the country, which is why I'm excited about this convention as an opportunity for us to reintroduce ourselves. That said, that is for some the framework, right? And so we're being intentional about how kind of first impressions. So our volunteers, we're really shoring them up to ensure that folks are greeted, because we also have a reputation of being a little chilly. Okay. So just saying.
Yeah.
So we're going to make sure that, our guests, from the moment they come into the city to the time they leave, they're greeted with a fun, fresh, welcoming Boston spirit, and our volunteers will help us to do that. But we're also going to, during the conversations that happen at the convention, be honest about our history, but also stand firmly in the work that we are doing to help move our city forward.
Do you think, speaking of moving forward, do you think a few days, it's a week plus, of conventioneers and the convention being here can contribute to the progress? This sort of one and done thing? I don't mean in any way to minimize it, but it is. They'll be here and then they'll leave. Can it make a difference?
So it is not going to, the convention in and of itself is not going to change people's complete mind on our city. However, one of my hopes coming out of this convention is that folks will go back to their community saying, wow, Boston.
Yeah.
There's something different about what's happening there. It's not what I expected. It's something's there. And that it will start to open up their minds and their hearts to where we are today. That, I believe, is possible, which is, again, one of the reasons why I'm excited about how much of Boston, how much of Greater Boston is leaning into this thing. I mean, we are showing up as a whole community, and that right there is the magic. I also think, as folks are on that stage who are from this area, who are doing work in this area, in this region, as they're on that stage and they're telling our stories, that's going to be another opportunity for people to get a fresh perspective of the work we're doing. Because we can say anything about who we are. Where the rubber meets the road is when we can talk about the public policy we're advancing and the impact it's having on people's lives.
One of the cliches you hear speaking about Boston being a racist city is if you go to New York, you go to Baltimore, you go to Philadelphia, you go to D.C., you go wherever, like on the East Coast. I haven't traveled that much west. But anyway, you notice right away that there's a huge black middle class everywhere you go. Yeah. And you come to Boston, and that isn't true. You don't see that many African Americans in the Back Bay. So why is that? Why have we failed where other people, at least in terms of seeing an active black middle class right in the downtown of the city? What's with us?
Well, the first question that we have is, where is the middle class, period? Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation. That is something that we as a society really need to start focusing more on, is building, maintaining, and sustaining our middle class. That said, I think, Marjorie, what you hit upon is an important point, because a lot of kind of how many people think about the inclusivity of a community by where people live, right? And that gets us into a conversation about housing, generally speaking. I do think as we're talking about housing policy across the Commonwealth and here in the city, I do think we should be intentional about not just inclusive housing policy, but ensuring that people, regardless of their racial or ethnic background, truly do have an opportunity to buy in neighborhoods and build community in those neighborhoods. I am a proud Hyde Parker, so I have to shout out Hyde Park. I know folks say that Dorchester is the largest and all that, whatever, but Hyde Park is really the most diverse. I'm just saying. And so, and in Hyde Park,
to get there, though.
But it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm just saying. And
long ride.
But what we find in Hyde Park is a growing black middle class and Latino middle class, right? You do see in Hyde Park economic diversity as well as racial diversity. And I'd like to see more of that across the city and Commonwealth.
A couple of last things. Tanisha Sullivan, head of the Boston chapter of the NAACP, in advance of their convention being here any day now. We'll tell you again what GBH's presence is going to be in a minute. We're very happy that we are going to be there in lots of iterations if we can. It's sort of, we were talking, I don't know if it was with the Revs or somebody, Marjorie was off yesterday. I was admitting on Marjorie's behalf and mine how ignorant both of us have been about so much of black history in this country. We're specifically speaking about the Tulsa, with Renee Graham, the Tulsa Race Massacre. So many people learned when we were at the Embrace that the Kings met here and how pivotal it was in their relationship and their lives. The NAACP and its predecessor, the Niagara Movement, 100 plus years ago, were here. I mean, so there's a pretty deep historical connection at some critical phases, no?
Absolutely. When we talk about the Niagara movement, as you shared, Jim, the spark for the NAACP, it's important to note that Bostonians from the very beginning played an integral role in the formation of the NAACP. In fact, the very first national president of the NAACP was a Bostonian, a lawyer, Moorfield Story.
A white guy, by the way.
Yes. As you know, as is true, when we talk about the work back in the early 1900s, this type of racial equity work, anti-lynching work, it was very dangerous, still is very dangerous. For Black folks to be out front. And so we do see kind of historically a number of white allies really stepping up to kind of be that front face of movements. And the NAACP is no different. But we also have, William Monroe Trotter, of course, right? And W.E.B. Du Bois, right? And like we have all of these, Du Bois, my apologies. We have all of these leaders in our history that have Massachusetts roots that were part of the NAACP. The NAACP Boston branch, we are super proud to be the first chartered branch of the association.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. Oh, okay. Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go. So, in 1910, here in Boston, 60, a multiracial group of folks, Bostonians, came together and said, we want to have a branch, a unit, a chapter here in Boston. And in we were granted that charter, and in 1911, received our charter at the Park Street Church.
Oh my God.
Okay,
well, that's great.
So right here in the corner of Tremont and Park. So we've got some really deep history in the NAACP, and because of our leadership in the NAACP, what you see over time are the fingerprints, the fabric of Boston, woven into this association.
Great. So, by the way, again, it's naacp.org/convention if you want information on the program, when you might want to go, and that sort of thing, correct?
Yes.
And before you go, this is a personal thing, and I'm sorry to bring it up.
Okay.
I see you walked in with an old friend of mine, Natasha Perez. She's really hard to deal with, don't you think?
No, she's amazing. Are you kidding me?
Really?
Natasha is
I've always found her to be a really difficult kind
She's
of
a
person.
rock star.
You don't think so?
She is a rock star. Natasha is a boss.
She is?
Listen, yes.
Oh.
Okay.
I never realized that, Natasha. It was nice to see you.
But I've heard about you a lot. I've heard about you
One
a
of
lot,
my
Natasha,
favorites.
over the
I
years.
love Natasha Perez.
We're going to promote the NAACP. We're going to promote GBH's role in the NAACP.
Yeah, should we go down the list here for a second?
Yep, I'll go down the list. We're going to be there. That's me and Jim. The 28th from 11 to 2, live episode from the GBH booth in the hub. As you mentioned, the convention social focal point, free, open to the public. It'll air usual time and be on YouTube and stuff. Special edition of Basic Black, hosted by you.
Surprise,
Tanisha.
surprise.
Will be live streamed the afternoon of Friday the 28th, right after we get done. And she's, of course, Tanisha Sullivan, NAACP president, an attorney and civil rights leader. She'll host that program. Then on the Sunday, the 30th, 2:30, on the hub stage, American Experience executive producer Cameo George will host a conversation around his upcoming documentary, The Busing Battleground, a powerful telling of the tumultuous integration of the Boston Public Schools. And GBH News reporter is going to be there on site to cover the convention, and we'll be talking to them, and I hope
during our show,
a bunch of people that are also at the convention.
Well, you just left one thing out about we'll be layered live 11 to 2 on Friday. We're sticking around, and we're going to do a ton of interviews Friday and throughout the weekend, which will play on Monday. So you'll hear a lot of coverage leading up to the convention, and Friday and Monday virtually all of our show will be dedicated to the historic event happening here, the 114th convention of the NAACP. Tanisha, congratulations. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Good luck. I hope you can get some sleep the next few days.
It'll be sleep August 3rd.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much. I was speaking with Tanisha Sullivan, president of the Boston chapter of the NAACP. Okay, I'm apologizing in advance for this because this is a very embarrassing transition. We're talking about the NAACP convention.
Yeah, we should be clear.
No, it was Jim's
I was totally against this.
Jim's
it was
idea.
Marjorie's idea. Go ahead.
Okay, we are moving.
Why don't you ask Tanisha Sullivan what she thinks about it? Really embarrass yourself.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you want to have an opinion on men wearing Speedos?
I heard that question.
What do you think?
Ago, and I was like, what is happening right
exactly.
now?
What is happening?
What is happening
What do you
right
think?
now?
She's avoiding the question, obviously.
They have like 200% increase in
1 year.
sales here and across the world. So we're trying to figure out
What do you think?
what this is about.
I think we got an answer. She looked at us in an odd sort of way. It's all we need to know. Tanisha, great to see you. Goodbye.
Good to see you as well.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So we've already embarrassed ourselves, so I'll keep on
Let's do it
embarrassing.
more.
We are moving on to something a little below the belt. Ha, 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 ha. The return of the so-called banana hammock. Oh, my God. Why are more men than ever wearing Speedos? This is a burning issue for this burning July.
For us.
And we're going to talk about that coming up next. The number is 877-301-8970 if you want to call or text us. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com, GBH News, and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. People often ask how we pick our topics.
Mm-hmm.
We meet in the morning. We discuss what to talk about. I said if we did this, I was going to quit. And the producers talked me back, and I am here.
That's not true.
CNN, provider of fast-breaking, hard-hitting political news, that is out with a bold claim that the Speedo is back. Sales of the scanty male swimmer are surging, so to speak, though one would argue maybe they're just growing in America as they've been a summer standout in most other countries with a coastline, particularly France, places like that. CNN quotes this guy, Stephen Doig, D-O-I-G. He's the men's style editor for The Telegraph, as saying there's a certain machismo, majesty, to the garment, regardless of physique, which is total BS. So are you team Speedo, or are you clutching your pearls, as it were? 877-301-8970. Here's my position. I want to be clear.
What is your position, Jim?
As early as I can. 40% of America is obese.
Right.
Just say no. 30% on top of that 40% are overweight. Just say no. For people who are Olympic swimmers and other, Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's back there in Austria, Ricky Martin, there's a photograph we saw this morning, is perfectly fine.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Beyond that, I would say just stay away.
Well, you know, I thought that too, but then the more I read about Speedos, I was convinced that maybe you really look better in a Speedo if you are someone that's maybe battling your weight. The claims here are that swimsuits flatter all body types and they avoid the problem of the muffin top, where the man's muffin is overhanging the waistband of a regular pair of swim trunks.
The man's muffin, so to speak, hangs over the waistband
but it doesn't,
of
no,
the Speedo.
No, because the Speedo,
you can't even see the
because
Speedo.
Because the Speedo goes way below your waistband, so there's no waist to.
Do you know what it's called in the UK?
Over.
A budgie smuggler. I hope I didn't say. I don't even know what that means. I don't know. By the way, in all seriousness, we asked Jamie specifically not to do any AI generations of me in a Speedo, so he didn't do that. One? But he did an AI generation of Spencer. That happens to be my middle name, unfortunately.
Yep.
Browdy in a Speedo, and let's not post it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
877-301-8970. Where are you on men in general? Not incredibly fit men, but the vast majority of us. Where are you on men wearing a Speedo? I did say, CNN's reporting, usage from 2022 to 2023 is up 200%.
That's right. Well, that's not in the United States. We're up.
Who the hell cares?
I think we're up 54% in the United States.
Well, that's still a lot, don't you think?
200% in Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
How do you feel about men? Don't read what people say. How do you feel about going to a beach and seeing the typical overweight American male in a banana hammock, as they call it?
Usually I'm horrified, but I'm trying to rethink, because I read the manual.com, which is a fashion magazine.
What did that say?
Which argues that men should wear Speedos. I said before.
Oh, that's there.
They actually make you look better than, even though it is kind of letting everything kind of hang out kind of thing. They think it doesn't cause any embarrassing pressing in on the worst places to press in on. And the magazine also points out that a man who wears them displays considerable confidence, Jim.
Well, he does.
Because Speedos are tiny, and they are intimidating, and they leave very little to the imagination. Supposedly, they're also edgy, and that they used to be popular back before the grunge came in the 90s, and everybody decided they needed to wear kind of long shorts to the beach.
They used to be popular until the American male exploded.
Right.
Which he did about. By the way, I was just told.
Thing.
Wait. I was told we have a dozen plus students from Spain in the audience. Is that true? There they are.
Oh, my God.
Okay. No, we're not celebrating the students. What we're asking is,
Speedos
if you are you Spanish students, they're huge in Spain. Raise your hand. It's mostly women.
Mostly
here?
women.
Okay. How do you feel about an overweight Spaniard? Excuse me. I'm talking to the students.
Their hands,
I am.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you like. I know most Spaniards are not overweight, but for those who are, how do you feel about seeing that male on the beach? Raise your hand if you're in favor of that. Exactly my point. Nobody raised their damn hand.
Okay. Maybe it's just men who like them then, because the women clearly don't.
Did you see how many hands went up?
None. Okay. Here's one last thing. Supposedly they're very comfortable.
Yeah.
And you can pack them really easily.
Yes.
And they make the point that when you do go swimming.
You can pack them? Oh, pack them.
You can pack them very easily.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I was not trying to be funny. I didn't know what you meant. Go ahead.
You can put them in your suitcase, I should say, very easily. And when
the bathing suit in your suitcase.
Yes, and when you go swimming, you don't have everything wet up and down your thighs.
Okay.
You just have that little small section, and they dry very quickly.
Can I speak to the Spanish students one more time? If the male is not overweight, but is really fit, sort of Olympian swimmer, how do you feel about that? Raise your hand if you're in favor. Exactly. Okay. Okay, every one of them raised their hand.
Yeah.
I think that says all you need to know.
A fit man with a six-pack looks very good in the Speedo.
So I think the bottom line is I will not be wearing a Speedo this particular summer. Don in Burlington, you're first on the Speedo Hour here on Boston Public Radio. Welcome, Don.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Yes, we can.
I think you're both using some really sort of sexist and body-shaming type language.
We are.
And if wearing a Speedo makes me feel beautiful, who are you to judge? I think they're a wonderful thing.
Now, wait, don't go away. Does your Speedo make you feel beautiful?
It makes me feel beautiful and very aerodynamic in the water.
Oh.
And how does it make you look?
That all depends upon the eye of the beholder. I think I look fantastic.
He looks beautiful. He said so himself. Don, I'm with you. If you feel you look beautiful, then you do look beautiful. Don, thank you very much for the call. That's a beautiful spirit. I embrace that.
That's a beautiful spirit. Aerodynamics in the water is very important to all of us. Now, Karen emails. I'm a single straight female. I just spent a day last week poolside in Provincetown during Bear Week.
Right.
And it was wall-to-wall Speedos on all shapes and sizes. You used to live in Provincetown. Did you wear a Speedo when you were in Provincetown?
I'm embarrassed to say I actually did. I know.
Wow.
I'm sorry you asked that question.
Oh my God!
Well, I was.
Close your eyes and imagine that.
I was hot. I was. That is so unkind.
Sorry.
It is really unbelievable. You know what? In the words of Don, I felt beautiful, Marjorie.
Yeah.
And isn't that all that really matters?
That's right. It's
No,
how
it
you
isn't.
feel. Aerodynamics, Jim.
I felt aerodynamic.
That is the word of the day.
Let's go to Paul in Boston.
Boston.
We're talking Speedos. Hey, Paul, what's up?
I just have one comment. I've spent decades of summer vacations in Wells, Maine.
Yeah.
And this is not a new issue.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout my whole life, everyone has called Speedos Canadian grape smugglers.
Yes.
And everyone is fine with that.
No, but I think that is inappropriate. There are a lot of nicknames, most of which, Nut Hut is another big one we can't say on the air. Most of them that we identified this morning we can't say. But you said, now are you a Speedo wearer like Don a minute ago, Paul, or no?
No, I'm not.
And why is that?
I've always been a little bit insecure about things like that.
You're an honest man, Paul. Thank you very much for participating in the show. 877-301-8970 to call or to, what's that thing? Text. Yes.
Pickleball Maggie has texted. She's
Oh,
from
hi,
Wayland, of
Pickleball
course. She
Maggie.
says she's doing the crossword while I'm listening. 47 across, form-fitting swimwear brand. 6
Wow.
letters, starts with an S and ends with an O.
That's great.
And, of course, she was able to get that immediately. Now, several people are pointing out that if you ban Speedos, why aren't you banning bikinis? Ann from Rosendale asked that. And another texter says, women are expected to wear something skimpy on the bottom, even if they are overweight. So it's pretty warped that men hide their girth while women have to let it all hang out. So what do you think about that, Jim?
You and I discussed this morning before the show, and I have to say, and I can't explain it, I hope it's not sexist, but I am not troubled at all by almost any women making that choice, though I'm deeply troubled by a man who chooses to wear a Speedo. I mean, so what is that about? Is that sexism?
I don't know. I don't know what it's about. I don't know, Jim.
You don't know?
I have no answer.
Okay,
I
fine.
have no answer.
877-301-8970. Here's the great Bryan Cranston as the dad from that horrible show, Malcolm in the Middle. Apparently a Speedo enthusiast. In this scene, he's at the sporting goods store dressing room trying on bathing suits brought over by his wife, whose name was Lois.
Hal, let me see your bathing suit.
No, all these ones you picked out are too big and baggy.
Baggy is good. It's less surface area I have to shave.
I like the little one.
No, Hal, you always pop out of the little ones.
I do not pop out. That was one time.
Exactly. I think that is one of the concerns, and I think Bryan Cranston got it right. 877-301-8970 is the number.
There's a lot of concern about beachwear here from the texters.
Let's hear it.
For women and men.
What is it?
Yeah, well, women are allowed to wear clothing that show every curve and bulge. So why aren't men allowed to do the same thing?
Well, they're allowed. They can do whatever the hell they want.
They can do whatever they want. I was at the beach yesterday. Saw a lot of thongs.
Women or men?
Women.
Women.
And most of them look terrific.
What was the Speedo quotient at that? Where was this on the Cape?
I did not see any Speedos.
On the men?
Craigville Beach. Did not see any Speedos.
Okay.
No, I did not. So, but there seems to be a lot of concern about if women can do it, then why can't men do it? Tanya from New Hampshire. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Tanya.
Hi. Love you guys.
Thanks.
I just want to say that as far as the Speedo goes, nobody wants to see that.
I'm sort of with you, actually. But go ahead. Why do you say that?
Okay. First of all, because it looks grotesque. I'm sorry. I have sons. I have a husband. You're not wearing a Speedo. And you know why they call it a budgie smuggler, Jim, in the UK?
No, I do not.
Found this out.
No.
Okay, so budgie is the British word for parakeet.
Well, that
okay.
explains. So it's a parakeet smuggler. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Budgie, I love that. I think that's great. Hey, Tonya, thank you for your call, and I think you're making the right decision about your husband and sons.
Here's Dave in the car. No better form of birth control than squeezing me into a Speedo. So he's a man who is assessed that it's not it's not kind of for him.
See what this anonymous texter said? I have a feeling you will not agree with him. Maybe you should read the text from an anonymous texter there.
Break records on the next fun drive. Oh, with the smug hug, banana hammock with a strategically placed picture of Jim.
I don't think that'll sell a lot, actually.
All in fun.
I think we'll stay with the smug mug. Thank
Here's
you.
another texter that says, nude swimming is best for those who really love swimming. Men and women should wear as little as they can. We can ignore them if we want. Beware of shrinkage.
Whatever happened, by the way, speaking of that, remember the woman we had on who was leading the petition drive in Nantucket, right?
For
topless bathing for women. It won.
It did win.
It was approved by the Attorney General, who was then Maura Healey before she became governor. And then I think there was an initiative, or whatever you call it. The people voted, or the town council voted, or something. So what's the impact of that down there? Do you know?
I can't believe we haven't seen stories on it.
I'm surprised too, actually.
I mean, maybe people are ignoring it. Maybe people aren't doing
That
anything
is a little
about
outrageous, by the way. Speaking about men and women and the you were saying, why should men be able to wear a Speedo if women can wear a bikini? Sort of, if men can go topless, why can't women? Which was the argument that woman made, and it prevailed in Nantucket.
Chris from Boston says, as a gay man, I love wearing a Speedo to the beach and to swim, especially in Provincetown. I guess they were very popular by the pool, as the previous texter said, or any other queer safe space. But I'm aware of location and don't wear them on vacation to places where there might be more conservative locals. So.
There is a high quotient of Speedos. I hadn't thought about it until that person texted in Provincetown. That is totally true. David, you're in Lexington. You're on Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and me, Jim Browdy. Hi.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie.
Hey, David. What's up?
I'm 70, and I still wear Speedos, and I look good from the front and the back.
Now, wait a second. Is that one of those things where, like Don said, if he feels beautiful, it's fine? Do other people feel you look good in it or not?
They think I look fine in them. I actually have a very...
what do you have?
Tasteful nude photo of myself.
Oh, I'd love to see that, David. Thank you.
And I showed it to my photography group, and they all thought it was terrific.
Yeah, I spoke to your photography group. They weren't quite as happy as you think they were. David, thank you for the call. You know what that reminds me of? The great late Elsa Dorfman, speaking of a nude photograph of David there. Elsa Dorfman and Harvey Silverglade, great civil liberties lawyer. Elsa Dorfman, one of the greatest photographers and people who ever lived, who took the full-size photos. In their dining room was a life-size, full-frontal photograph of one of her closest friends. Who would that be?
I believe it was Allen Ginsberg.
It was Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah.
In the dining room.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, each to his own, Jim.
Should have worn a
Ginsberg,
Speedo, is what I would say.
Well, there are certain people, as the story points out, who that people don't object to.
Like who?
Daniel Craig as James Bond in Casino Royale.
Well, he's very fit.
The Olympic diver and soccer stars David Beckham, Cristiano Ronaldo as well, actor Luke Evans. I mean, there are certain people...
Well, that's ridiculous. They're all perfectly fit with 0% body fat.
I think some people would argue that that's the kind of person they would want to see. But again, it's very sexist because not everybody's going to look like a supermodel like Gisele Bundchen in their bikini on the beach.
That's a good point.
From Nadia and Norton, if I don't want to see my man's banana in a hammock, I certainly don't want to see anyone else's.
Oh. Shalini, I believe I got that right, in Lexington. What's your deal?
Hi. Okay, so I have a very Roman brother-in-law, Gianluca Lazzaro, who lives in Chicago with my sister.
Okay.
32 years ago, he came to stay with me in the D.C. area to learn English. Stayed with me for a month. We go to the town pool. This is outside D.C., community pool. He shows up in the tiniest Speedo we've ever seen. Granted, he's tall, handsome, and muscular. Anyway, nobody wore Speedos back then. So I said, Gianluca, don't wear a Speedo. Nobody wears a Speedo here. People don't stare. They stared. Their jaws dropped. I was so embarrassed. This is our town pool, all my neighbors. I said, Gianluca. He said, Shailu, it's okay. It's okay. I said, Luca, it's not okay. You're not in Italy. You're in Rome. You're not in Italy. You're in D.C. Oh, my God. It was so embarrassing. People's jaws dropped. There were other things, too. I often wanted to smack him, but I didn't because they weren't married as yet, and he was my guest. But 32 years later, he's a surgeon in Chicago. Love him dearly, but oh, my God, that was so funny with him and his Speedo.
Shalini, thank you for the story, and thank you for sharing it with us. We really appreciate it. Say hi to the brother-in-law.
Here's a Speedo story.
Time's up, Marjorie.
Well, I'm going to fit this in. I was a young teenager on a family beach vacation. My priest cousin was coming for the day. My cousin and I were very nervous that he would show up wearing his suit and collar. Guess again.
Is that really true?
That's what she says.
It's my kind of priest. Okay, we got to go.
Okay, we are all done for the day. And I don't think we solved that one, Jim.
I think we did.
Come back to Boston. Welcome. Oh, you're leaving. I'm not welcoming people back to Boston Public. I'm on the wrong page. Okay.
Welcome's at the beginning.
That's at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're done. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. We have a new shortened podcast. We have the 3-hour one.
Love that.
And then we have a 30-minute one.
Yep.
You know, because maybe 30 minutes is enough.
About enough, yeah.
In any case, tomorrow we're going to be joined.
Speedos will make the cut. I doubt it.
I don't think so either.
Go ahead.
No, I don't think so.
Go ahead.
Tomorrow we're going to be joined by our medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard's national security expert Juliet Kayyem, Massachusetts shark researcher. What a perfect time for Greg Scommel on his latest book, Chasing Shadows of My Life.
I started reading it last night.
Yeah.
It is great.
He spent his life tracking the great white shark. That's the name of the book. And he is a fascinating guy, and especially now with sharks everywhere. And Vulture podcast critic Nick Qua. He's got great ideas about what podcasts you should be listening to. Naturalist author Simon Montgomery, everybody loves to listen to her. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, with additional support from Shay Sullivan. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. We want to thank our special staff at the Boston Public Library, Evelyn Brito, Sandra Lopez-Burke, and Steve Baracci. I'm Marjorie Egan.
And we want to thank you all for coming, particularly the students. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
We hope you weren't too upset about such a ridiculous topic on an American talk show.
I was. I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thank you again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. Meanwhile, have a great day.